Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sex Education Alliance's first parent sessions in conjunction with International Sex Education Day. We have people still hopping on board. I will let people in as I see their names pop up, but we're going to get this train rolling because I know we all have a busy day. So welcome, everybody, for being here. I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. My name is Kim Cook, and I'm the founder of the Sex Education Alliance, which we also refer to as the C or the Alliance. I'm a former elementary school nurse, and I have a bachelor's of science in health education. I have a certificate in LGBTQ studies, and I'm also a certified health education specialist. I started my sex education journey many years ago / decades ago as a volunteer birth control educator at Planned Parenthood. After my kids flew the coop, I started Teen World Confidential, which was an online resource to help parents get the conversation going. I also published a book by the same name, Teen World Confidential, 5-minute topics to open conversation about sex and relationships. As I did my business, Teen World Confidential, I recognized that there was a need for independent educators like myself to have a place to network, share ideas, and support one another in our work. We now have members from the UK, India, Australia, Canada, and the US, where I am based. So the C started about 2 years ago. The Sex Education Alliance is a global community of educators, writers, therapists, and medical professionals. These individuals focus their work on comprehensive, inclusive sexuality education for families and communities, and their work centers around sex, relationships, personal safety, and they are the leaders in their field. The C adopted International Sex Education Day because the missions are pretty much the same. We want to help parents get the conversation started about sex and relationships and personal safety. Now, you're probably wondering, International Sex Education Day, how did that get started? Well, here's what happened. I was doing some research on a talk that I was giving, and I realized that just over 100 years ago, there was a lot of conversation because syphilis was rampant across the country. At that time, there was no treatment for the disease other than abstinence. So on February 2nd of 1919, preachers across the land coordinated their sermons about the evils of sex before marriage in order to stop the spread about syphilis. So needless to say, lectures don't work. So that didn't really resolve the issue, but I decided to resurrect that day 100 years later and make it much more relevant to today's work using a positive communication framework. Hence, International Sex Education Day is now held on Groundhog's Day, February 2nd of every year. Now, our C professionals are renowned experts and leaders in the field. They want to help you help the youth in your life. So today, in conjunction with International Sex Ed Day, we present the parent sessions, and we're so happy you are jumping in to help us make a splash in sex education. Today, you're going to be hearing from 4 of our experts presenting 3 different topics. You'll have a question and answer opportunity after each speaker as well. You can use the chat that's on the right-hand side of your screen, or some speakers will encourage you to just openly ask questions. It's a small crowd today, so it's okay. It's a very easygoing crowd. At the end, later today, I'm writing an email right now. At the end of the day or tomorrow, you will get a link to this presentation. You'll have access to it for 1 month. You'll also have access to the links that our presenters are offering. They're all offering some free resources and information for you to enjoy at your leisure, and you will have links to all that as well. So that's pretty much how our day is going to go. So I think we're a minute ahead of schedule, but I think I'm going to go ahead, if it's okay with Lauren, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Lauren, and we'll just get the train rolling. Lauren Barineau is presenting her discussion, The Myth of the Talk. After earning a master's in public health at Emory University in Atlanta, she spent a decade working in sexual health education, developing programs, teaching youth, supporting schools, and selecting comprehensive sex ed programs and training teachers to implement them. She's coached countless teachers, parents, and other adults on what to say about sexuality and how to say it. Lauren strongly believes that conversations about sexuality should be positive, proactive, and integrated across all parts of our lives. And as a child's first and most important sexuality educator, it's their primary caregiver. And she really enjoys speaking to that group as well. She founded Talk More based on the belief that open and honest conversations and messages about sexuality, starting at birth and echoed throughout communities, are the single most important thing we can do to change our shameful and secretive culture around sexuality. In her business at Talk More, you'll find high quality, research-informed resources for talking about sexuality with kids and guidance for how to use those tools within your family, community, and culture. And without further ado, I am going to transfer this over to Lauren.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kim. I'm thrilled to be here, see several familiar names, so welcome. My approach is to be super conversational, so come off mute or hop into the chat box as is helpful for you. Also, just listen if that's helpful for you. Do what makes the most sense. But welcome. I'm going to share a little bit about the myth of the talk and how we can reframe that whole idea and flip it on its head. And happy International Sex Education Day. My name is Lauren Barineau, and I'm excited to get started. My pronouns are she, her. I've been a longtime sexuality educator, both in the classroom and supporting and coaching staff who are teaching sex ed. I love pasta. I always joke that I am the first to start a buffet, no matter what. I'm the mother of 2 young people that help me think creatively about this work every single day. I have a master's in public health, and I am a super fan of only 2 things. They are the Parks and Rec TV show. I aspire to be the fictional character Leslie Knope on my very best days, but that rarely is the case. And Brandi Carlile, who's a musical artist who I find just personally inspiring and is what I write most of my content to her album. So if you too enjoy those things, I'd love to hear it. I want to just take a minute and establish a bit of safety before we get started. I want to acknowledge that talking about sex can be incredibly difficult. It can feel overwhelming. It may bring up unfriendly, unhelpful, and unsafe memories. Feel free to step away or leave at any time. Prioritize yourself and what you need from this experience. Secondly, sharing is always optional. We say all the time that the details stay here. So who said what from what community in what organization, but the learning leaves. I sincerely hope that you share this with somebody. Share this with somebody close to you. Share this with a partner, a pet, a parent, someone you're co-parenting with. So what are those key ideas that you walk away with and share without leaving the details here? And I ask that you only share details about your experiences talking to kids, not personal details about your sex life. Those won't be covered during this presentation and not what it's intended for. And then lastly, recognize and respect a diversity of perspectives and experiences. We all come to this with different levels of knowledge, with different levels of expertise, and with different values, which we'll talk a lot about throughout the presentation. We're learning together and appreciate your point of view and respect of others learning as well. So with that, let's get chatty. I would love to know, what are some things that you love about talking with kids related to sexuality? And at the same time, what makes you hesitant or gives you pause related to talking to kids about sex? Feel free to unmute or share in the chat box. What do you love about talking to kids about sex? And what makes you stressed, nervous, hesitant, overwhelmed? And why we might put this conversation off? Thanks, Wendy. They do ask the best questions. I love to hear what they're thinking about. Love talking about consent and boundaries. Absolutely. And love that they're so interested. Yeah, I think a lot of times we assume that we're talking to kids, but really they are full of questions and are learning along with us. Appreciate it. Thank you. So I'd like to level set just really quickly by making sure we're operating with the same set of knowledge and a bit of the nuances around the data when it comes to family and caregiver communication about sexuality. So gut check yourself really quickly. Myth or fact, Kids who talk with their parents about sex are more sexually active. This is absolutely one of the biggest fears that parents have, that if we talk to kids about sex, that we will give them permission to do it. I'm seeing a couple folks in the chat box. Yeah, for sure. This is false. This is a myth. So what does that mean? We all know that youth who talk frequently with their families about sex report a delay in first sex, they report fewer partners, they report increased condom use, less STIs, and increased ability to discuss sex with a partner. That one I think is really important, the ability to discuss and communicate about sex and sexuality. We know this, well established, and from a public health point of view only, we would acknowledge that these are all really good outcomes. We also know that talking with our kids is an effective way to enhance their overall sexual well-being. It does not cause them to be sexually active any earlier. It doesn't give them any permission. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We know that young people who are rating general communication with their families as more positive are actually delaying sex longer. So there's one opportunity to sort of reframe the idea of these conversations, especially when you consider the importance of starting early. So if you are someone who's looking to start conversations when you think puberty's kicking in, or when you think there's a reason for someone to know about birth control, of course that's awkward, right? If we haven't talked about this early with our kids to really build this muscle and build this trust, and if we haven't talked frequency in particular was noted as a really important factor in making these conversations less awkward. And that helps us and our kids build more comfort and more confidence in these conversations. So yeah, totally a busted myth. What about this second one? Myth or fact? Gut check yourself really quickly. Family conversations about sexuality are often rooted in stereotype and bias. Do you think that's true? Do you think that's false? What kinds of things have you been saying? Do we ever perpetrate bias in our conversations? That is for sure a fact. What are some of the nuances there? Daughters are talked to about sex far more frequently than sons, and mothers are usually the initiators. While you might know this in a subconscious level, it's really frustrating to see it laid out in the data pretty clearly. So moms and daughters are having the most frequent conversations, but what's even more frustrating or upsetting, or feels like a bigger barrier, is that young people of different genders are receiving different messages about sexuality. For example, males are frequently receiving more messages about condom use, while women or female identifying people are receiving messages about delaying sex until marriage. So right away, these are pretty stark difference of the way the gender bias stereotype, the ideas of masculinity, and how we think about sexuality, and it's sort of the ideas of power can show up in our own conversations, our own well-meaning conversations. In particular, young people are also getting really interesting messages about people of another gender. So boys are told to stay away from girls who are aggressive, and girls are told to stay away from or be cautious of boys who are opportunistic. So again, how are we navigating and framing some of these messages about sexuality and gender? Megra is saying truth. In my experience with high school parents, they're often talking to their sons about entrapment. Woo, yikes, versus consent, right? So what does it mean if a young woman or a person that a male is having sex with isn't using birth control, is trying to withhold sex, right? How do we talk about sex, gender, and power in not explicit terms, but subtly in the ways that our bias and gender stereotypes are showing up? And then, and this one is the most disheartening to me, is that talks are almost always framed in terms of consequences and rarely on the positive aspects of sex and sexuality. So we're talking about what to avoid, how to avoid it, concerns or problematic outcomes with early sexual behavior, consequences of becoming a parent, instead of talking about the way that sexuality is a part of who we are as people and the ways we can have healthy, positive, and pleasurable sexuality as we get older. The last quick gut check before I get into more specifics about how to do this is kids aren't interested in hearing what adults have to say. In your experience, is that a myth or a fact? Kids just aren't interested in hearing what adults have to say. Yeah, thanks, Megra. That's absolutely false, although that is frequently a reason why families are avoiding these conversations. Kids find these conversations uncomfortable because they're often reactive, meaning a parent is only starting conversations after they've noticed a young person is watching porn, or they found a condom or other form of birth control in someone's private bedside drawer or in their bathroom, or they realize a kid has started dating and so they want to react by having a conversation. That's pretty unhelpful. And parents have never brought it up before. So it is awkward, uncomfortable. It's hard to navigate. No one wants to have that conversation. Youth want to see their parents as a trusted resource for help, and they're waiting for their parents to initiate the conversation. Meanwhile, at the same time, there's data that says that parents are waiting on kids to initiate the conversation. So there's this mutual avoidance that just continues to go over time until kids are older and older and older, both expecting the other one to say, oh yeah, my kid or my parent is super askable. They'll let me know when they have a question. Meanwhile, none of them ever make that ask. And so what I want to encourage through this quick presentation, so a really condensed version of how do we think about having or navigating conversations about sexuality with kids as our ability to build a muscle for conversation, including our kids' ability to build a muscle of conversation that starts early in conversation and graduates over time into their preteen and teenage years. What we say, what we don't say, how we say it and how we don't are all key factors in us becoming trusted adults and young people having confidence and comfortability really to come talk with us as their trusted grown-ups. So I am working to flip the script. I think all of us are in our own ways, from avoiding these serious conversations that are one time, that are stressful, that are called the talk, the analogy I sometimes use is like a poor young person is seated somewhere and like in those interrogation scenes in movies, there's a bright light aimed in their face and parents or caregivers are just like firing questions at them. And it feels awful, right? How do we change this entire narrative to early conversations that happen frequently in ways that are graduated, that feel easy, that they are developmentally appropriate over time, so that this absolutely feels like something that both kids and parents can navigate together? And so what are some specific ways that we can do that? I offer sort of 4 key ideas that families can use to make this feel much more approachable and easy to do. The first is really defining for families that sexuality is far broader than the act of sex. A lot of times we limit our understanding of these conversations to puberty, which feels like one specific rite of passage, and then sexuality in terms of having sex and what a young person needs to do to prevent pregnancy or STIs. When in actuality, sexuality is a huge umbrella that includes many of the components outlined here and others that aren't even there. We're not even, STIs are on the list. Pregnancy prevention isn't on the list. And when you look at how broad sexuality is, you'll find that many parents are already having conversations about sexuality. We're talking about consent. We're talking about self-esteem. We are talking about and modeling gender roles for the young people in our lives every day. We are talking about friendship, which is just a big step stool or a big series of steps up until healthy romantic relationships. And so what we can start to do is say, hey, you are already doing this. You're already talking about sexuality with kids. And there are ways that you can take the conversations that you feel really confident in having. Let's say, for example, you feel great about navigating friendship or gender roles or self-esteem. And you can take that to talk much more about self-esteem, body image, and how that influences the choices we make in our relationships. And then our choices in when we want to have sex. We can talk about gender roles and start to talk about LGBTQ identities. We can talk about communication and then navigate to how we would negotiate condom use with a partner. So you can start to take the early age appropriate versions that you're already having and be able to integrate more specific conversation that's related to specific sexual behaviors. The second way to do this, and what I think is the most important thing that families can do before navigating some of these conversations, is get really clear about your values. So once you understand what sexuality is and how broad that is as an idea and the number of conversations we want to have with our kids, we want to be really clear on what we want to say to our young people in those conversations. We talk with teachers all the time about getting clear on our values so that they don't share their values in the classroom, right? In many ways, as someone who's worked with teachers over a lifetime, how do we make sure that teachers are representing and including and affirming all points of view in a classroom? And the unique opportunity, the foundational opportunity that families have is to be the ones to share their values and to add context around culture, perspective, value to conversations about sexuality. And so we've got to know how we feel about many different behaviors, perspectives, points of view. And I'm going to put in the chat box now a values clarification, or what I call a values expression exercise that I developed. This is the most broad one I have. You can also find on the Talk More website, free and easy to download, ones that are available for early childhood or preschool education, for folks that aren't teachers but work in the youth development field more broadly, ones that I think are specific to puberty and navigating those values. For example, when is it okay to shave? Who can shave? What body parts to shave? How do you feel about menstrual products? When can a person use tampons? What menstrual products are and aren't okay in our family? And so to navigate some of these big questions that are really driven by context and values. You can see some examples there. Is it okay for teens to have sex in high school? Is kissing okay for 8th graders? Is a little bit of jealousy okay in a relationship, right? That really comes down to a person's value and how every individual or family navigates that idea. Being totally honest with each other is the foundation of a healthy relationship. Agree or disagree. So families can look at a value statement, again, get that gut check for why they agree or disagree, and then navigate how you can share that idea with the kids in their life, with their little ones. This lets us be way more intentional about which values we're sharing with kids and why. If we don't consider our values, we very likely will instead share stereotypes. We will lean on our own biases. We will share what we think society says we're supposed to say about a thing instead of what we really believe about a thing. One clear example I had of this just the other day is a parent posed a question to a mom's group that I'm a part of about, I let my teen high school child have sleepovers at their romantic partner's house. I'm okay with this, but everyone else I share this to is like really concerned. They're like, wow, I hope you're having the talks, or you better be ready to be a grandparent early. And so an interesting question then came up about, well, if this is your value, if you are really comfortable with it, how are you expressing that to your child? What conversations are important to have with your child about safety? Are you communicating with the other parent in that teen relationship? And how do you navigate conversations with your other parent peers who don't feel as comfortable with that? And so I think that's a really helpful example of how your values might be different and how knowing your values helps you make sure that you're clear about what you want to say to your kid instead of what you think other parents tell you you're supposed to be saying. So it provides you an opportunity to talk really explicitly about values and shows your kid that you care about their well-being, as well as let you answer the question about why. I've made a decision for our family, or I think it's important that you wait until high school to shave, and here's why. So that we're able to justify some of the conversations and boundaries or expectation setting that we do in our families. The second key idea here, and I've mentioned this before, is talk early and talk often. This is super easy to do, and this is age appropriate. We as adults are often gatekeeping information about sexuality with very little kids, when this is an easy, age appropriate, and often encouraged conversation to have. I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had with little people about consent to hug, consent to touch, consent for high fives, consent to grab or push or touch, even often in a playful way, and how that easily scaffolds to conversations with older kids about sex explicitly. When we talk really often as little people about the names and functions of our body parts, whether it's diaper changes, bath time, talking about scrotums and vulvas in ways that feel easy, we are building both our muscle and our kids' muscles in the ability to then talk about body parts and their role in correct and consistent contraceptive use. Or when we talk early and often about healthy friendships, what it means to be a friend. And I have two little people, and I talked to one just the other day about when you're with someone who really cares about you and you care about them, what does it feel like to feel good and know that you're with a friend? So noticing how their behavior changed when they are with folks that they feel really close and comfortable with as peers. How did they know that that was a friend? And so having that conversation makes it really easy for us then to scaffold into what does it mean to be in a healthy romantic relationship, or what characteristics are important to you. So all of these conversations are totally age appropriate and start to build that muscle so that you're having a series of conversations that get more nuanced as kids get older. Thirdly, how do we find moments for proactive conversation? And as a counterpoint or as a pair to that, how do we react and provide healthy, supportive, and shame-free nonverbal reactions when our kids bring questions to us? So there's a ton of ways to open this up and navigate these questions. How do we talk about privacy when we're going to the bathroom? That's a conversation about sexuality and body parts. How do we talk about the meaning of song lyrics when we think about them? In my family, somehow, no thanks to me, my kids know all the lyrics to K-pop songs, which I don't know. It's not something I'm good at, but we do talk a lot about what they're singing and why, and what some of the slang language in those songs mean, and what they're saying when they sing it. And why actually some of those are school appropriate songs and some are not. Always capitalizing on a traditional or school or social media moment. What is happening? Why is it happening? If you have little people, what's a conversation or a choice that a character in a book makes and why? Talking about all the ways people show love. This is super appropriate for the month of Valentine's Day, where romantic love seems to permeate our airwaves. And so there's actually a lot of ways we can show love. We show love as families. We show love as friends. We show love to ourselves, to the pets or animals that are in our lives, and we show love romantically. And so how do we really front load all of these other ways that we love? Family, friend, self, and animals that have nothing to do with romantic love. But by honoring and celebrating the diversity of ways that love shows up, it lets us talk way more easily about romantic love as kids get older, or start to navigate what love means to you and how that feels. I wrote a blog post about what love means because I found so few resources for explaining what that can be like. Introducing body parts and body positivity during diaper changes or bath time. So there's lots of ways to integrate this. Or if you are a person with a teen and they're getting their first device, their first technology, their first coveted cell phone, how are you navigating conversations about sexually explicit media, sexting, sending nude images, or viewing porn? That's a critical conversation to have at that point. So finding moments to lean in, and then also while young people are asking you questions, how you are approaching that opportunity is equally as important. So watching your body language, making sure you're finding appropriate times. So if you're at the dinner table, for example, and somebody's like, wondering why they get boners or how they get boners or how long a boner lasts, acknowledging that like, maybe we don't want to talk about it here, but it's a really thoughtful question. Can we pause and talk about it at a safer or more comfortable time? So how we respond in the moment is really important too, which is like a big conversation for another day. And then that leads me to sort of my fourth, oh yeah, Andrea, respond rather than react. That's a really helpful and specific way to think about that. is to think about bias. I've been like noodling this for a long time and have been noticing the ways, both as a field of sexuality educators and myself as an individual, are leaning on and using bias or preconceived ideas or longstanding and perhaps harmful ways to perpetuate this understanding of why we talk about sexuality in the first place. So acknowledging that bias is ingrained in all of us, it's everywhere, and it's hard to navigate. So then what we can do is start to recognize and change our language as we talk to young people about sexuality. The first thing we can do is not focusing on centering our experiences or our family's experiences as normal, and instead acknowledging all people, all identities, as all families as normal, to avoid the unintentional othering that we sometimes do. So instead of saying something like, well, sure, in our family, we have two moms and dads, but like sometimes families have two moms, sometimes families have two dads. Saying something like that feels essentially innocuous, no big deal. But that kind of language can center us, right? A two-parent mom-dad family as normal versus them, which is some families or a couple of other families, or you might know someone who has a parent that is a two mom or two dad household. Feels like we're othering or acknowledging in a subtle way the biases we have about that difference. And instead, what we can do is really talk openly and widely about some families have two parents that are moms and dads, and some families have two parents that are just moms. Some families have two parents, and some families have many. Some families have two parents, and some families have one. Some families have two families, and some families have a ton of adults in their house that are able to raise a young person. So how do we talk about some, many, other, most? Many girls have vulvas, but not all of us do, right? In ways that feel like our experience is included in some way in all of our experience, so that we're better acknowledging all people, all identities, all familial structures, to avoid the othering that happens. And then my third really specific piece of listening to our own language and changing it is thinking about how we talk about or communicate bias related to really specific ideas or groups of people. So gender roles and stereotypes, saying things like, we don't really know what makes a person a boy or a girl. They have to tell us, or we can't tell that about a person. We have to wait for them to let us know what their gender is a really inclusive way to talk about gender, instead of talking about typically what roles men and women do or how men and women express their gender differently. Instead saying, we'll wait till someone lets us know if they're a boy or a girl. Or even if you're a person who's cisgender, really naming your own gender, that I too have a gender. I too have pronouns, because we all do, right? They don't just belong to people whose pronouns do not align with a specific gender expression. And so helping to navigate that conversation. But one of the things I do too, this is one of my favorite tips because my kids are a little bit younger, so we read a lot of storybooks. I am always changing the pronouns in storybooks. You should too. I am always think it's fascinating how storybooks name inanimate objects like trucks or shoes or monsters with he, him pronouns, and I'm changing them constantly. So I'm able to normalize the they, them as a totally acceptable and regularly used pronoun. And so I'm removing the overwhelming weight of he and him in the way I find them show up in children's literature. So that's a quick and easy thing you can do if you have little people. Body size and type, talking about like, oh, I really have a thing for bigger guys, right? Or like, it's okay if your body's bigger. Our bodies are beautiful at every size. And while that is true, why are we only saying it's okay if your body is bigger? So how are we perpetuating bias in small ways, in the ways that we talk to young people in our life? The way that we talk about young parenthood as sort of mired in consequence or an inherently negative thing. And so from a reproductive justice framework, really acknowledging that a person can choose to become a parent at any age, and that parenting is more difficult because it changes our relationships, our finances, our time, our burden on our time at any age, right? Parenting is hard no matter what, not just because you're young. And so starting to change the narrative around around young parenthood to move it away from being inherently negative, or that it comes with a unique and specific set of consequences. Talking about race and ethnicity related to sexuality and the overwhelming adultification that we do for young Black women in particular, and the assumption that they are already sexually active. How does that creep into some of our conversations, and making sure that we are really talking to or providing information in a way that's developmentally appropriate based on our brain age, and not on the ways that our bodies might be showing up in interactions or in classrooms. And then the way in which we talk about many sexual partners as an inherently bad thing as well. It's similar to young parenthood, that the good or the healthy choice, right? So already removing good and bad from our language, that the way that the assumption is that the good choice or the healthiest choice is to have fewer sexual partners. Again, from a purely public health and reduction of disease spread perspective, there may be some fact around the less likelihood that a person may have an STD if they are having fewer partners. That doesn't reflect on who they are as a human being or their moral existence, right? And so from a more pleasure focused and recognition of our sexuality, acknowledging that some people have many partners and some people don't. Again, that's a part of who we are as people and a choice in how we express our sexuality. And so then once we're aware of our bias and we're aware of our values, we can begin to navigate conversations about these topics and groups in ways that are reducing the bias that we share, in ways that also layer our values into that. So being thoughtful about the ways we're having those conversations. So how can we start to do this, right? So sure, you're saying these are great, go for it. There's a couple of tools that you can use that Talk More has. There's also some incredible ones made by folks on this call. So Talk More has free, easy to download parent planners. I will put that link in the chat box now so that you can grab them. But these are all, oops, sorry, let me pull the chat box up. These are divided by age, divided by topic, and divided into 3 sections. So let's say for you pull, for example, ages 6 to 9, you're looking at the section for puberty and body positivity. First, you'll see parent prep, right? What should you read as an adult? What should you watch as an adult before you have a conversation? Teaching tools are things that you can specifically do with young people that you know and love. What can you watch together or read together? And then lastly, what are specific things that you can say to start a conversation? What are those conversations? So we have them for ages 0 to 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 9, 10 to 12, and 13 to 15. They cover a ton of age-appropriate topics with a bunch of background information for adults, things to do with kids, and things you can say. And yeah, thanks, Kim. Everyone will get the links emailed to them if you're not able to pull them now. Those are downloadable. And then there's a ton more resources there for families. So at the Talk More website and highlighted in those green squares that you see, there's information for families you can pull. It's up here on the right as well. You can find those values clarification exercises, a conversation generator, bookmarks that are downloadable around consent. And so there's a lot of things that you can do in your communication with families or in the organizational work that you do with families that might be a helpful resource. And so then the last big idea, of course, is so what now? Once you know what to say, you've thought a bit about how to say it, you've got resources at your fingertips. What are some of the topics you would like to bring up with your little one in the next 2 weeks? What feels most important? What's been something that you want to say, but you've been avoiding it? What are some ways that you can start the conversation? How can you find a safe space, whether it's on a drive to school or a walk to school, whether it's right before bedtime, whether it's while you're preparing a meal together, whether it's before or after, homework time in the afternoon? What are those times that you find in your family are best suited for conversation that you can start to build that trust and open the door? I will be the first to admit, as someone who's worked with a lot of kids and has kids of my own, that they're not always ready to talk. They're not always interested. But one thing that I'm working to do very hard is make sure that they know that the door is always open, even if they don't want to walk through it right now. That choice is fully up to them. But you are working to build the muscle and trust so that when they've got the questions, they know that you're the person that they can come to. So I encourage everyone now to make a commitment to plan for having a conversation in the coming weeks that feels tricky, to lean on the things that you feel more comfortable with and try and make them a little bit more nuanced, or try and push yourself a little bit further to say content that felt a bit inappropriate, but you feel like now is super age appropriate. The last thing I'll add is I am happy to offer a free Talk More workshop where we can cover some of this content. I do so sort of a hurried and condensed version given our time constraints, or talk about other things that are helpful. So if you would like to sign up for the Talk More newsletter, I'll put that in the chat now, and Kim will follow up with an email. But for anybody that signs up today, I will select one name. I feel like you're not allowed to say raffle, but I will randomly and fairly draw a name and offer a free workshop for somebody that signs up today. And with that, I'll pause. My contact information is here, and I'm happy to answer any questions or highlight any thoughts that came up for you as we talked. Oh, thanks, Andrea. Great energy. Yes, I've certainly had my cups of coffee this morning.
I loved what you were saying about opportunities to talk to kids. I started typing this, so I'm erasing it, so I'll just speak.
Oh, sure.
When raising my girls, one of my favorite things, we had to carpool because we live out in the country, so we carpooled everywhere. And I loved as their peers, they were sharing conversation, you got a really good snapshot about what was happening in their world. And that was often a really terrific opportunity to open up conversations. It's not like it was a secret. I mean, I was sitting there driving them. So that was always a great opportunity to start talking.
Yeah, I talk a lot about, again, that analogy of like a bright shining light in your face. Sometimes kids don't want to be asked about themselves, but they are happy to share what's going on with their peer group, right? So instead of asking about a young person specifically, what do you think about this? What do you think about these dances on TikTok, right? Because I'm on TikTok, I'm far too old to be, but I'm a lurker. And so I feel like it keeps me young. So instead of saying, what are you thinking about? Asking instead, what are you noticing about kids your age? Are they dating? Or what are you noticing about some of the stuff that's going on with I've heard some or noticed some friendship drama. Is that anything you've noticed? So it's not so much about them and their behavior, but it's more about their peer group in general, which may build a little bit more comfortability on the age of perhaps an older childhood, preteen or teen who feels less confident or ready to share all that information with you directly. But it still gives you a sense of what's going on or what's rattling around in their brain. Oh, good, Megra. I'm glad you like the parent planners. Yeah, those are all there. Oh, and Wendy, thanks. Wonderful tips and insights. You're very welcome. So with that, Kim, I don't know. I'm just checking to see. Oh, Sherry had a question. How do you guide parents who feel religion is an important aspect and is a barrier for parents to have talks around sexuality or avoid? Yeah, super thoughtful question. So I think number one, it comes back to values. So I would encourage a parent to get really clear, sort of do some self-reflection on what is it about religion that prevents them from talking about sex, and what are the goals that they want for their little one, right? So if your goal is health, or your goal is safety, or your goal is feeling confident in changes related to puberty, figuring out ways that you can communicate those overall goals while still sharing some of the religious values that they may have. And so part of that is the why, right? So being culturally competent enough to recognize that religion plays a big part in many families' lives, and then being able to figure out why or what it is that they would want to say within the realm of religion, and really question, is it something that your religion wants you to say that you believe, or are you feeling pressure to say that and you might believe something a bit different because you want your young person to be as healthy as possible, right? So I think self-reflection is really important. And then I think it's okay to say things like, in our family, we believe that masturbation isn't okay. while you can also say it won't hurt your body. And many people engage in this behavior. Like, I think it's not an either or, but instead a both and, right? So you can both share religious teachings about your religious values at the same time that you're sharing some non-shaming messages about when it's okay to have sex for the first time, or acknowledging that many people do, et cetera, et cetera. So I think more specifics to your question may be helpful. And I feel like I'm just word vomiting a bit, but I think it's the core is really like a both and. How can we and share both our values and some facts about health and safety? Yeah. Kerri, I see you've come off mute. Did you want to add something? This is a conversation. I'm not the expert.
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I loved your example about talking about whether or not you're having sleepovers with boyfriends and girlfriends. And I would love, so I'm working with a mom right now who has 2 foster sons, 14 and 15. The younger one has a girlfriend, and they've only been with her for a year. And they, without asking, they have been in bed together, door closed, even though they had an open door policy. And I would love your feedback sort of on how to navigate that. She's not feeling super close to the boys. They've only been there a year, like I said, but wanting to be respectful of her, family values, and she's never been a mom before, and also respecting their personal autonomy. So I'd love your input on that.
Yeah, I think it goes back to some of the both and, as well as clear boundary setting or expectations, right? So starting the conversation of, it seems like this relationship is really important to you. I'm glad that you have someone that you feel safe and comfortable and close with. I want to make sure that they feel welcome and like they can be a part of our family and be safe and comfortable at our home, right? So I think starting from a really, here is why this is important to me. I'm glad you had this person here and I care about you. And I care about and value the relationship in your life. And the one boundary is that when we're here together, so that everyone feels safe, including me, it's really important that the door stays open. And here's why. I want to make sure that you all have the opportunity to think through or talk about decisions that you make. I want to make sure that you are making healthy or safe choices about sexuality. And I want to, whatever she feels comfortable saying within that back half. But I do think starting with, I care about you. I see this relationship is important and I want you and this person to feel welcome here. And the one expectation or boundary for our house is that the door stays open so we can all feel like everyone in the house together should feel safe. So that's both you and the person that you have here and me and whomever else is in the house. So that means the door has to stay open. And so I think that that's just being really clear about that boundary while respecting their autonomy and the importance of that relationship in their life. Because I think that's the threat, is you're saying, I don't care about you. I don't care about the relationship, or I'm worried all you're going to do is have sex in there, which is not, I think, what the parent is worried about either. Although if that is a worry, I wonder too, if there's a way she could gently broach, are you thinking about having sex and how can I support you in navigating that decision? Or, getting safer sex methods. So I'm wondering how seems like that's not the conversation to have first. Maybe start with, I care about you and the boundary is the door stays open. And once some more trust builds, is that something you're thinking about and can I support you in that? Or why does that feel important to you? Why do you want the door closed? So I can honor some of your privacy requests in a way that doesn't just assume that you're doing sexual behaviors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just watching. I know my time is done, Kim. I'll transfer the mic back to you. Thanks so much for listening and engaging. I think you're on mute, Kim.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. It wouldn't cooperate. Let me see here. Can y'all see me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to pin me because I just see Lauren's name up there. Thank you. That was awesome. I learned a lot and I took some great notes. I thought this was really interesting. I really liked when you said, a lot of times we talk about the consequences. That's what we focus on rather than it's a part of who we are. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's right. We do. We often talk about, you think about your future, think about, where do you see yourself, which are good things. Those are values. I mean, that's really good to focus on, but sometimes that is our focus instead of talking about sex as being a part of who we are. And I think that was a super terrific suggestion to kind of keep that focus on what sex is, that it is a part of us. So thank you for bringing that up. I thought there were a lot of really terrific tidbits that you shared with us. Thank you so much. So it is 9:50. Consequences are usually an euphemism for, punishments. Right. Exactly. So what we're going to do now, I will send out a follow-up email like I mentioned before, and everybody will get those links, which is terrific. I can't wait to see the values worksheet. I think that's really brilliant. We're going to go ahead and run. So we have experts in the sea, all kinds of experts, and we're going to go ahead and run some of the videos while we have a little brain break here. If you want to take a little break, go get something to drink. You can enjoy some of the videos in the meantime, and then we'll pop back on time for our next two speakers. I will say we might start about 5 minutes early because we're running a little ahead of schedule, and I know we're all busy. So we might go ahead and dive in 5 minutes earlier. But in the meantime, I'm going to share my screen and show some of the videos. I hope you enjoy them. Can you guys see that? I don't see it.
Yeah, I could see it.
You did? Okay. Do you see it like really teeny or do you see it for real?
That's big.
I'm not seeing that. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on here. Well, when this recording comes out, you're going to see me messing around with this. Darn it. This is why we practice. And I practiced yesterday. It all worked. I don't know why it's not. Awesome. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I don't know why it's not working. Wendy, it's your video and it is not popping up.
So what do you see on the screen? Because we see the video.
You see it? I can't get it
Yes.
to play. I see my Zoom background, the Zoom page, which is weird. 'Cause I don't even know.
Do you want to go to Zoom, the upper side of Zoom, and look at the view option?
Here we go. Yeah, I know what I was doing. Thank you for asking me that.
Hi, I'm Wendy Sellers of
Regard, that's
Puberty
what
the Wonder Years, alias the Puberty Lady. February 2 is International Sex Education Day. Here's a tip that will help your child stay safe and healthy. Start young. From the beginning, teach your child the dictionary terms for body parts. As you're diapering or bathing your child, casually name the penis and vulva. Start by teaching your child about consent. That means teaching them to ask permission before touching others' possessions or bodies, teaching them to listen for their answer and respect their answer. By teaching your child about the terms for body parts and about consent, you will be giving them the tools they need to stay safe and healthy throughout life. For more tips and parent resources, please visit my website at pubertycurriculum.com.
Hi, parents and other trusted adults. My name is Kim Cook from the Sex Education Alliance. International Sex Education Day is February 2nd, and I would like to share my tip on how to talk to your kids about sex and relationships. Set the stage. Find a nice quiet spot that just you and the child in your life can have a private conversation. Keep it short, 10 minutes. Share an ice cream cone or a cup of hot cocoa. Make it casual and fun and light. Remember, it doesn't have to be that difficult. This is just the start of many, many conversations. Your goal right now is just to get the conversation started so they know that you're a person they can trust. Have a good day.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kerri Isham. I'm a certified sexual health educator from Nanaimo, BC, Canada. I run a business, a sexual health consulting business called Power Up Education. I wanted to share with you on February 2nd, it's International Sex Education Day, and we're encouraging people to talk to their kids for even 10 minutes. A tip I would love to share with you is some kids are pretty shy about talking about their bodies, sexuality, and sexual health. I recommend actually buying them a journal. They can ask you questions, you can respond, and you don't have to have any face-to-face interactions. This has been a really useful tool for some of my clients. Hope you take the time to connect with your kids today, and thanks to the Sexual Education Alliance for supporting this event. Thank you.
I'm Andrea Brand from ARB Coaching. In honor of National Sex Education Day, I want to offer a tip to help you feel comfortable talking about sex and not view conversations with the kids in your life as a big, scary deal. The tip is timing. There are many, many wonderful organic opportunities everywhere that lend themselves to naturally broach a variety of sex education topics. You simply want to keep your eyes, ears, and heart open to noticing them. For example, music lyrics you are listening to with your child, scenes in a movie or a television show that you're watching together, or even billboards on the side of the road that you pass while driving, all offer great conversation starters. The more you notice and steer into these opportunities, the easier they become and reinforce you as an approachable and askable, trusted adult. And a final tip, no need to pause or interrupt the song, movie, or TV scene. Waiting for the entertainment to end before opening the conversation works great too. For more support overcoming personal hurdles talking with your kids about sex, visit my website at arbcoaching.com.
Hi, I'm Rowena from Amazing Me, and my top tip for parents and trusted adults is that the aim is not to shame. For the millionth time, get your hands out of your pants. It's gross. Get your grubby hands off my boobs. Don't worry, I lost weight after my growth spurt, and you will too. I'm angry and disappointed in you for not telling me that you saw pornography. Come on, give Granddad a hug, or he might not give you a birthday present. It's embarrassing that that skirt is so short. I can see what you ate for breakfast. How gorgeous you're growing up, and you got little boobies. Geez, you stink. We don't talk about those things in this family. Oh my, you have an erection under your PJs. What are you thinking about? And next time there's a sticky patch on your sheets, you can clean them up yourself. God doesn't want you to be interested in sex until you're married. How do you feel when you feel ashamed? I feel like there's something wrong with me, not confident in myself. I might keep my feelings to myself, and I definitely don't ask any questions. I may even feel guilty in that I've let someone down. Shame, it's an uncomfortable feeling. And as a result, I don't want to talk to anyone about it. I might even lie or change the subject, and sometimes keep it a secret. Shame should not be used to motivate or manipulate behaviour. When we're talking about any sexual health topic with children, shame is unhelpful, and ultimately it's downright toxic and dangerous. Shaming your child doesn't help your child's understanding either. And it certainly does not help them to trust you or to be a parent who they reach out for help or have their questions answered. Shame ultimately causes fear, anger, embarrassment, mixed messages, confusion, resentment, and it ultimately breaks down healthy relationships. It's not always easy. I know. I've said really shaming stuff to my kids at times. I've embarrassed them many times, especially in front of others, when I have not respected their privacy or consent. I've apologized squillions of times too, and that's important. But the aim in what you say and do is not to shame, because ultimately you want your child to be safe, have healthy relationships, feel empowered to make their own choices, know that they are the boss of their bodies, and last but not least, be comfortable to ask you anything. The aim is not to shame. And that's my top tip when talking with children about any sexual health topic.
Hi, happy International Sex Education Day. My name's Erica Scott, and you can find me at creatingconsentculture.com. My tip for today is about hearing no graciously and modeling that for your kids and helping them practice it. So we actually teach people to thank others when they express a boundary around their physical autonomy. That could sound like, hey, thanks for letting me know what your boundaries are. Hey, I care about you. Thanks for letting me know what you do and don't want. Things like that. The trick is to model it when your kids set a physical boundary, let them thank them. And also when they're about to interact with others, say, ask someone for a date or something, you can help them to practice hearing no graciously. Being able to thank someone when they say no to you is a lot better than running away or getting upset. Or in awkward silence. That's my tip for today, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Landa,
I'm Barb.
and we're presenting accessible parent-led sex ed for neurodiverse children and youth for the Sex Education Alliance's parent sessions on February 2nd, 2023. But we wanted to give you some top tips from both of us. My top tip is start before you need it. And a great way to do that is to have some books like Your Whole Body book or Amazing You, which are great ways to teach about body parts long before kids might need to use them.
I love this. So my top tip is kind of related, which is that you don't have to do this like from memory, right? A lot of us don't have this information. We weren't born with it, and maybe we didn't learn it. So using books, some books that I think are great are like a book called Sex. Melissa Carnegie has a delightful book if you're looking for ways to start conversations called Sex Positive Talks to Have with Kids. These are all super cool things. Obviously, we love talking about this. So
we do. So come and find us at all of these places, and you can learn more about some of the books that we talked about with our podcast, Sex Ed Book Review Podcast.
Cool. All right. See you later.
See you on February 2nd.
Okie dokie. Hopefully you all were able to see those. I hope that worked out. Let's see. All right. Is everybody still with me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, yay. Okay, cool. I didn't lose you. Wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and make a few comments on those videos. I thought they were wonderful. One of my favorites is one of our new members, Erica Scott. And I love what she said about saying thanks for letting me know your boundaries. We often talk about how important it is to set our own boundaries, right? And, communicate that to other people and feel confident in that. But I loved her perspective in which somebody says, hey, these are my boundaries. And the other person responds with, oh my gosh, thanks so much for letting me know. I know that's great. And here are my boundaries. Just that very actionable, verbal agreement that, yeah, that's my bound. Thank you for telling me about your boundaries. I appreciate that conversation. Gosh, I don't know. I just thought that was such a really neat perspective, something I hadn't really thought too much about. We set our own boundaries, but we have to be willing to verbally accept other people's boundaries too. I thought that was perfect. And then our final little chat that we had, we're going to show more between the next two speakers, but this last dynamic duo that spoke, they're actually going to be speaking with us like now. So Landa and Barb, I'm going to do a brief introduction about you two, and then I'm going to hand it over to you all. Let me make sure I'm sharing my screen with you, Landa. Yeah, let's see. I'm going to make you a co-host, Landa, and also Barb, but hang on. All right, so I'm going to give a little bit of information about Barb and Landa. So Barb and Landa are going to be discussing accessible parent-led sex ed for neurodiverse children and youth. Barb is a board-certified behavior analyst and ASEC certified sexuality educator. Barb specializes in staff and caregiver training and development of sexual behavior intervention plans for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Barb also works to coordinate with educators to promote equity and access to comprehensive sexuality education for children with disabilities. Other areas of practice and research interests include pornography literacy, abuse prevention for children and adults with disabilities, and dissemination of behavior analysis and the potential it offers to promote healthy sexuality for people of all abilities. Her partner in this discussion is Landa Fox of Positive Connections. Through her work as a behavior analyst and consultant in a variety of settings, such as homes, schools, clinics, preschools, and daycares, Landa has accumulated diverse practical experiences. Her practice in these areas has focused on supporting autistic, neurodivergent, and disabled children and youth. She holds an MA in special ed with a concentration in autism and developmental disabilities from UBC. Landa is also a certified sexual health educator, having completed certification through Options for Sexual Health. So at this point, I am going to throw it over to you all, and I'll let you go ahead and give it a go.
Great. Thanks, Kim. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yes, welcome. We're talking today about accessible parent-led sex ed for neurodiverse children and youth, as Kim said. My name is Landa Fox, and my pronouns are she and her. Barb, you want to give your intro?
Sure thing. Yep. My name is Barb Gross. Also, like Landa, sex educator and behavior analyst. My pronouns are also she, her.
Wonderful. So we do have a tiny little warning with our handy red button here. Obviously, we're here talking about sexuality and sexual health today, so that shouldn't come as a surprise to most folks. But we will be using some explicit language. We'll be talking about sex and bodies. So pop in those earbuds if you're somewhere public where that might not be wanting to be displayed. Towards the end of the presentation, we also have some pictures with some realistic but not real depictions of genitals. So we wanted to give people a warning for that. And we'll let you know when those are coming up on those slides as well, in case you want to turn away if that feels like something you don't want to experience today. Again, they're not real depictions, but they are realistic. So when we're thinking about sexual health and what we've sort of framed here as neurodivergence, and so that could cover a variety of different diagnoses that people might be familiar with, such as autism, ADHD, FASD. Those are sort of all in the umbrella of neurodivergence, which is sort of a growing term to sort of put an umbrella over a lot of different ways that people's brains work and different ways that people think. And so when we think about sexual health on its own, there's, some stereotypes, and maybe some people have more comfort or less comfort. But when those things intersect with neurodivergence or disabilities that maybe aren't neurodivergence, but even physical disabilities, there's some overlap that leads to a variety of different sort of biases and stereotypes. And so we wanted to talk about how that plays out and what that looks like as an introduction. So we've sort of classed this or think about it as existing on kind of a spectrum with two ends. And so the first end of the spectrum, when we see an intersection of sexuality and neurodivergence or disability, is that people, and this spans the lifespan from children and youth all the way through to adults of various ages, are really desexualized within our society. And so that looks like some of these things that we've noted here. So that means thinking about people as having no sexuality. So just that, if we think about a classic idea of like a sex drive, air quotes, but that people who are neurodivergent or disabled don't have a sex drive or aren't interested in sexuality, that they wouldn't have like sexual thoughts or feelings. This happens a lot more when people have cognitive disabilities, I think, thinking that like, well, they must not be having any of those thoughts, making assumptions about what's happening in somebody's like private world inside their head. Or even if there's an acknowledgement that person has those thoughts, then that turns into, well, then we need to do something to prevent those from happening, right? And often that means like trying to actively do something to discourage those thoughts or feelings, and feelings could be like emotions, but also like body sensations, right? So we're assuming that their bodies just aren't responding in the way that all human bodies are to sexual stimuli. People are assigning people with disabilities or neurodivergence asexual or aromantic identities. So the A before both of those words essentially signals like lack of, right? If we're looking at it from a language perspective. And while asexual and aromantic identities are real and valid, and lots of people have those identities and claim them for themselves. So asexual, and there's various sort of definitions and people will define them for themselves, but talking just very broadly, asexual would be like a lack of interest in sexual relationships with other people, and aromantic would be a lack of interest in romantic relationships with other people. And so people with disabilities, it's also assumed by others that those would be the identities that they have, even if that's not the case. That they're not interested in sexuality, either like solo explorations of that or explorations of that with other people. And then what this often looks like is that assuming that we should be keeping people protected and keeping them really childlike, or people might be familiar with the term infantilization. So thinking about somebody who's an adult as a child. And one way that people often kind of perpetuate this is using language like, well, he's 25, but really he's like a 5-year-old, right? So there people are referring to like a cognitive age that really we don't have good measurements of like how to even like make that assessment. And so we're negating the fact that a person is in the body of a 25-year-old by assuming that they have the mind of a 5-year-old and therefore their body should be doing things that 5-year-old bodies would do. And that they don't need information is another way that this plays out. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we've got the opposite, where people that are neurodiverse or disabled are hypersexualized. So thinking about that they have like an uncontrollable sexual expression, they can't control themselves, and they might be like at risk of offending, something that would be considered or classed as a crime, or potentially like have offended. And so that's attributed to hypersexualization as opposed to lack of information. So if we keep information from people, then they are not going to understand, laws and expectations, and then they might be more likely to offend, but people think, oh, it's because they're hypersexual. This looks like people saying, well, we need to protect other people, or we need to protect that person. And that often looks like
segregation, which I have noted at the bottom here. So keeping people, separate in like where they live, home communities, all of that sort of thing. Assuming that any sexual behavior that a person with a disability engages in is deviant in some way, when oftentimes it just might be expected for their age. Thinking that people can't handle information. So if we talk to them about body parts, they're going to just ask questions nonstop. Or if we tell them about masturbation, they're going to do it constantly. Or if we let them know that pornography is a thing that exists, they're just going to go searching for it, and it'll be a bit like out of control. And this sort of idea that behavior will be out of control has resulted in like forced and non-consensual sterilization, either permanent sterilization or lots of people being placed on birth control methods without giving their full and informed consent about what that is doing to their body and their ability to have a child if that was something that they chose for themselves. But when we look at anything as sort of like any dichotomy or any binary, that we know that like people are going to fall on either side of that, but there's always going to be this big middle area. And that's truly where most people are going to fall. There's going to be some people that are not interested in sex, and there's going to be people that are very interested or maybe have out of control sexual behavior, but those will be the minority, and most people will fall in the middle. And so these are some of the ways that we thought about how this is impacting sort of like real world disabled or neurodivergent children and youth. And then this also spills into adulthood as well. So this often looks like exclusion from any planned sex education that might be offered in schools. If education in this realm is offered, it focuses exclusively on abduction or abuse prevention, which in and of themselves are not bad things to teach, but if that's the only concept that we're teaching, then that is more problematic. Another thing that tends to be like the only focus, and then other elements of like healthy human sexuality are neglected, is teaching just self-care skills. So like only skills around like puberty changes, basically how to wear deodorant, menstrual care, those sorts of things. And while those are important, if that's all we're teaching, we're missing some other important pieces of being a human. Lots of shame and fear-based. Again, this is coming from various sources of fear, and back to that dichotomy that people are assuming people fit into either of these categories. There's an assumption that a person with a disability or neurodivergence of some kind is going to lack the capacity to consent. So we should just prevent them from learning anything, because at no point could they actively, accurately consent to sexual contact. If sex ed occurs, it's usually significantly delayed and not offered like soon enough, or is very reactive. So again, something happens, there's a violation, whether that's a legal policy or just a social expectation, and then people realize that there's a lack of information, and then sex education is offered, but it's often reactive and delayed. And we also see a lot of assumed heterosexuality and cisnormativity. Particularly for people who are autistic, there's actually an overrepresentation in autistic people of more than neurotypical people, which would be somebody without neurodivergence, that there's more membership in LGBTQ community amongst autistic individuals. So particularly when we're working with neurodivergent clients, or if you have a like for Barb and I, there are clients, but if you as a parent are having a child who's neurodivergent, knowing that there's a greater likelihood that they will be part of the LGBT community than not is important to recognize. And then Barb's gonna take over.
I love it. All right. So yeah, the next thing we're going to pop into is talking a little bit about how information about sex and sexuality is usually learned, how people typically get this information, and then how some ways where this doesn't really work super well for the people that Landa and I support who are neurodivergent or otherwise disabled. So cool. Can you bounce me to the next page? Amazing. All right. So here are some things that we're aware of that in some places, not all, and some absolutely do this in a way that's more detailed and specific and useful than other places. But that schools can be a primary source of information around sex and sexuality. And that would be through, a sex ed class, something that's happening as part of physical education, whether that is a 1 or 2 day short course or it's an entire semester. So here's the problem though, and Landa can speak to her experience also, or can nod along with me, but I'm pretty sure we have the same experience where people that we support, one of two things often occurs. One is that the young people that I support who are neurodivergent or otherwise disabled are not allowed to access that education. So that perception that it's not something that's going to be necessary means that those students will just not have access to those classes. They'll be doing something else instead. And even in the event that that occur, or that they actually are able to be in that class, the information is oftentimes not provided in a way that's accessible. So part of what Landa and I do is come up with ways to make education more accessible, which means maybe modifying some of the content so that it's easier to understand, so that it's more concrete and specific, so that there's more hands-on practice or repetition, any of the things that we'll talk about later. Sorry, spoiler. But those things are necessary for good education that's going to be meaningful. And it's usually not modified in a way that's gonna work that way. Another way that young people often learn about sex and sexuality is through peers or through friends. And one thing that we know for the people that we support is oftentimes the peer groups are either smaller or non-existent. So either not having a lot of friends or not having friends at all, or the friends are of a really different age. And also because of a potential for differences in communication style, that kind of conversation and sharing information may not be naturally occurring. So for those reasons, a peer group being the way that kids are getting information doesn't work for the people that we support. Another place that, thank you for coming and talking with us, but caregivers are a really important piece of this, being able to build knowledge around sexuality. And one thing that not just in our experience, but also that bears out in research is that caregivers, whether it is parents, foster families, any other sort of supportive grownups, either do not feel prepared with appropriate information to provide education, feel uncomfortable providing that information, or for all of the reasons that Landa brought up earlier, feel like that information is not necessarily relevant. So because of that, caregivers oftentimes are not providing this information. And then if they are, it's limited in scope. So the other piece, and we're going to spend definitely time talking about this, so that we're not just doing like doom and gloom, we're going to give, tips and tricks. But I said earlier, sorry, dogs, hold on. We're going to do the last point.
That's why we do everything together. So Barb's dogs. So the last piece that we wanted to just highlight is that often teaching can occur in kind of one setting with one person and one set of materials. But often there's not enough focus on using those skills with other people in other places. So if teachers are doing something at school, a neurotypical person might be able to say okay, I understand that I need to also use that information at home, or vice versa. With the folks that are here today as parents, you're thinking well, I've taught them this stuff at home. And so, a neurotypical child might be able to say I understand that I need to apply that at school, and I need to apply that in my scouts group or whatever. But for a lot of neurodivergent children and youth and adults, neurodivergent humans, that sort of what we call generalization. So taking something learned in one place and doing it in another is really challenging. And so doing sort of isolated sex education is not great at any time. But we want to make sure that we've got sort of multiple pillars of support. And so trying to broaden and extend and dive deeper in the spirit of the C, Sex Education Alliance, and the ways that we teach. I'll let you take back over, Barb.
Thank you. I think somebody was trying to get my attention at the door. Anyway, all right. So yeah, the things that we know about best practice for being able to not just gain, but also retain skills. So again, that being able to maintain, but also generalize and have it apply. It is likely that it's going to take more time than I guess I'll say average, but that it's going to take more time for those skills to be learned. A lot of times it's going to mean reviewing materials more than once. So my experience, and again, Landa can speak to hers as well, is that when I'm teaching a new skill, odds are that I'm going to need to have more than one lesson. And that means if I'm using some kind of materials that other people have created, I'm probably having to come up with ways to be sharing that again, probably in a slightly different way, because otherwise it gets boring, right? But we need to go over things more than once. And the other piece, for all people, we know that just hearing information doesn't necessarily translate into using skills, but especially for the people that we support, having some kinds of hands-on practice of skills is extremely, extremely important. So do you want to jump over to Jim? Beautiful, cool, awesome. So now we get to talk a little bit, and we're gonna jump through this slide and get right into the next thing. But the things that we talk about where we need to do that more intensive teaching, and the rationale for this is because we know that having access to this information, even if it didn't occur young in childhood and we're doing it later in life, some of the people I support are in their 50s and 60s. But no matter when it happens, having this information is a primary preventative factor for sexual harm, including sexual abuse and assault. So with that education in hand, this allows us to help ensure that the people we support are less likely to be taken advantage of, or potentially to unintentionally engage in some kind of sexual offending. So we need to make sure that these skills are taught. Cool.
Great. I think here we also wanted to note that when we're thinking about like advocacy from a parent perspective to make that collaboration happen with school, that highlighting how important this is for protection of your child and protection and safety of like all children, say in a school environment, this is a good place to advocate for inclusion of some sex education goals or some social emotional education goals in individualized education programs or IEPs. So some of the things that we talk about might be worth putting into like an IEP or advocating for those to be included in a child's IEP. So the first thing that we're going to talk about as something that might need to be more explicitly taught is the concepts of public and private. And so here we have sort of like a teacher or a parent saying like, and that's something that you do in private. But the small child being like, well, what if I don't know what a public versus private is, telling somebody like you only can touch your genitals in a private place, or that's something for private time, isn't going to have meaning for a person if they don't understand what public and private is. I have a little free tote bag note here because some of the materials that I will show in the next few slides are included in the freebie sort of giveaways that people will get for signing up today and or watching the recording. So those will be sent out by Kim and the C. And so when I teach public versus private, I teach public versus private places, and then you can also teach public versus private behaviors. And so usually I do this as like basically kind of like sorting task, or I have example pictures and I work with students to either, if they can't speak, because I work with like a fair amount of learners that have either like no language or they have a lot of difficulty with expressive language. And so I will get them to just put these into piles, like show them the picture and say like, is this public or is this private? And you can do that without having to say anything. Or I could say, show me the one that's private. And then the person could point out in this group of pictures. And again, that doesn't require them to say anything. If somebody's really confident and is, on any given day has good, strong verbal communication skills, I might say, which one's private, and get them to label it. You'll notice that in a lot of these pictures, or in all of these examples, there are not people in them, because sometimes, particularly autistic students that I've helped to support, and maybe your child is somebody who would fit into this category, is they pay attention to irrelevant, what we would say is irrelevant cues. So they would see, like at the playground, if there was a person in this picture, they would know that that's public because there is a person there, but they're not really thinking about the other reasons why a park is public, and that's that anybody could come there anytime. So I purposefully use pictures that don't have people in them, in order, like if you go into the classroom, that's still not a good time to take your clothes off, even though nobody else is there. The definition of a public place includes anybody could come in at any time. And so making this into like a sorting activity could look like this, right? We've taken these pictures and we've sorted them into public places and private places. And generally I make the rule that private is at home, alone, in your bedroom or bathroom, especially if like bedrooms are shared amongst siblings or other family members. With the door closed and device cameras off is the other important thing. Once you turn in it, if you're in your bedroom, your door's closed, your blinds closed, you're by yourself, doors locked, no one's coming in. The minute that you turn your device camera on means that you're opening up that space to now be a potentially public space. So adding on that device camera to that definition is important, and being very specific is helpful for our learners. Barb?
Yes, my favorite stuff. So specifically having these images, thinking about ways that we conceptualize consent. And I mean, there's some really straightforward things. So, consent meaning that everyone who's involved with whatever is happening is agreeing to what's happening, and either is really excited about it, or at least is like really like definitely committed to what's happening. I may consent to go get a tooth pulled. I'm not necessarily excited to go get dental work, but I know that it's something that I really need to do, and I'm motivated to do it. So, but that, consent as an idea is something that is freely given. It's reversible. It's enthusiastic or emphatic is the other word that I'll use for it. Informed, sorry, I can't spell the word fries today, apparently. And specific, it's for a specific activity that's happening. It's, one thing that's happening in one space in time. So that's where we get the fries from without any branding on it. But there's another metaphor, and for me personally, even though, we talk about how, some people who are neurodivergent need information that is very specific and unambiguous. I also find that sometimes metaphors are really helpful. It's a way to be able to explain a topic in a way that's already approachable. So using this idea, and this is something I didn't come up with this idea. This comes from Al Vernaccio, who's a brilliant sex educator, but the idea that, if you're ordering a pizza, it's something that you are working together with somebody on. You're not just deciding for them what kind of toppings they like. You're not just deciding that you're going to get a pizza because it's time for pizza, because you're hungry. There's an interest, there's a motivation for it. But having that sort of collaborative communication is part of the pizza purchasing, and also the romantic or sexual negotiation process. So this is something where if I'm talking about this with somebody, using these kinds of examples as ways to remember the steps, ways to be able to think through things metaphorically, but also as a way to really hit on those sort of like critical factors. What are the important parts of ordering a pizza? Well, you need to probably decide that you're hungry. So what does that mean? That means that, you're interested in what's going to be happening. You need to be talking to the other person about what toppings they want. So what does that mean? That means that you need to talk about what things you're going to be doing together and what things are like
absolutely not okay. I'm not going to go like beat this metaphor down too much, because it, again, if you kind of work through it on your own, you'll hit on those things. And the other piece that's nice about it is everyone kind of has their own way to conceptualize this, but in general, the rules around ordering pizza are pretty universal. And if you're not following those rules, if you're just ordering for somebody and you don't care what they want to eat, you're not really a good pizza ordering partner. So it still tracks onto everything else. One of the reasons that I really wanted to use food in this image is because when I'm teaching the idea of getting or evaluating if you have somebody's consent to do something is through simple things like being able to recognize facial cues, body positioning as hints that somebody is interested or not interested in an activity. So sometimes I'll do this as a, hey, I've got a piece of candy, or I've got, a piece of candy. I'm going to keep going to piece of candy. Thank you for switching to the slide. I've got something that you're really liking, and it's all yours once you get to me, but you can only come toward me when I'm showing you that I want you to. So almost like, what's the game called? Red light, green light. That idea that you have, you're able to start moving toward me when I'm showing you that it's okay, but I'm not going to tell you, because I want you to be able to cue in on all the stuff going on in my face. And there's a big difference between my face showing that I'm open and engaging and ready, and my face shutting down and not having that same approachable sort of visual interest. For people who may experience facial recognition in a different way, especially people who are autistic, that's a skill that needs to be taught. And whether or not autistic people communicate or understand facial cues in the same way doesn't mean that it's not also important to understand when other people's faces are doing a certain thing. It can mean that they are no longer interested in you talking to them, you approaching them, you trying to put your arm around them, any of those things. So being able to read all of that's really important. And the flip side of it is because, again, we're talking about primary preventative factors for abuse. Having the capacity and the skill and the opportunity to say no to something is crucial. If somebody does not have the ability to refuse even little things, even what's on their plate for dinner, even what shoes they want to wear to go to school, it's a lot harder to build those skills and practice in order to resist if somebody is using, peer pressure or romantic pressure at some point in their life. So also flipping those activities around. So it's not just me with my piece of candy or whatever saying, hey, you can have this, but you can't come toward me until my body shows that. But teaching the person that we're supporting also, so teaching your child that, hey, I'm going to come toward you, but I want you to show me when you are not comfortable with me getting any closer. Another side benefit of that, you start to pick up on those interoceptive, those internal body cues that something feels uncomfortable. So the more we practice that, we also get to build that skill as well. That's my talk about consent. So another piece, again, knowing that the people that we support oftentimes don't experience peer relationships in the same exact way, don't have opportunities to access peer relationships, don't get a chance to be able to have social time at school the way that many other students do. That means that they're not able to kind of go through the process of puberty in the same way that other young people their age will. So what ends up happening is we end up teaching puberty as a thing that happens to your body, and that's kind of it. And that's problematic because, and I'm not the best person to talk to about puberty, because I feel like it's, I don't know. There are people who have more information and more knowledge and skills, but what I can tell you for a fact is that puberty doesn't just change what happens to your body. It's also their emotional changes. The way that you experience emotions changes and continues to develop throughout the entire puberty period. And also making aware and really centering the idea that for many people, but not everyone, there might be changes in interest in social connection. There might be changes in interest in romantic or sexual connection. So making that also part of the conversation, that is a normal piece, is really, really important as well. Do I get to talk about this one too? Yay, I love it. So another thing, again, these are like things that we sometimes need to teach explicitly. And I remember we were going through and deciding what we wanted to add to our slides, and Landa was like, why do you have these things on there? And I'm going to explain. So many of the people that we're asked to support have a penis. They identify as young men. And sometimes one of the things that we're specifically asked to help support is, hey, he's getting an erection. We don't know how to really like how to handle that. We don't know what to do about that. And there's not a whole lot of research on how people, go through life. If they have an erection, they're in a public place, they're not sure what to do about it. There's not a lot of research, but there are a lot of people in the world who have penises. So I did the work of asking a lot of people, hey, what are some things that you do if you get an erection and you're in public? So one obvious thing is, if it's something where you have, sexual feelings and want to, you want to be able to do something that you like to be able to masturbate or have solo sex, you need to go to a private place. So sort of like Landa is bringing up earlier, that's why that understanding that content is so important. You need to go into your room, close the door so that nobody can see or hear what you're doing. So that's something you do in private. But if that's not an option, this is where teaching people how to distract themselves. Some of this is through leisure activities. Hey, I'm having these feelings. I can't do anything about it right now. So I can go and do some drawing. I can play a video game. I can go read a book. I can go look at cat memes, whatever. That having those leisure skills, that's another good reason for having ways to occupy your time in a fun way. Another thing is sort of boredom level distraction things. So that's why I have the weird picture of an abacus. It's actually something that I've taught that's been fairly successful. Is some people will, do mental math problems. Some people will start listing, professional sports people. There's a word, athletes. That's the word. There's a word for sports people. Other people will, do some mental imagery of building a brick wall in their head. These are just some examples of what I was told. It can be useful strategies for self-distraction. For people who maybe don't have the capacity, that don't have the ability to see mental images. Landa, what's that called again? When you can't see?
Aphantasia.
Aphantasia, thank you. So for people with aphantasia, in other words, if I close my eyes and I try to picture a rainbow, I can't actually see anything. That mental imagery is maybe not going to work. So that's where doing something physical, whether it is, I don't know, an abacus is specifically what I always would recommend, but doing mazes, absolutely. Word searches, maybe it's not a super fun, I don't, love doing mazes, but it's a way to do something that's sort of not super exciting, but it's distracting enough to be able to wait out that time until an erection passes. That's way more than I thought I was going to be saying about erections, but here we are.
All right. The next bit that I'm going to talk about is a video model, and it is about menstrual management. So there's a video that has a pad and stuff in there, just giving people a warning about that. So this is an example of changing a menstrual pad where we might just explain the steps to a neurotypical person, but a person with a disability, neurodivergence might need to watch a video of the steps in action to be able to do it themselves. And so teaching with videos can be really helpful. So this video is just showing the steps of what it looks like to change a used pad and put on a new pad. You'll notice that this video is from like the point of view of the person changing the pad. And so for some people that can be really important, that by seeing somebody from the side or a different angle, or like you were watching a everyday movie, might not be the most helpful way to have video modeling for them. It might need to be like what they're actually seeing so they can put themselves into that moment when they need to use the skills. But teaching via video modeling, particularly for autistic people, has been shown to be a really effective way to enhance skill development. The next thing that Barb and I wanted to include as something that we have both had quite a bit of experience teaching is actually the mechanics and the skills needed on how to masturbate. So this is sort of something that a lot of people will just sort of like figure out on their own. That doesn't need any sort of teaching. But we've both worked with some clients where they haven't engaged in a successful masturbation routine. Oftentimes this comes up because the person is injuring themselves. So injuring their vulva or their penis because of repeated attempts to masturbate in a way that's really ineffective. And oftentimes there can be, particularly for people that are on medications, there's lots of medications that have some pretty clear impact on libido and sensation and ability to achieve an orgasm. So somebody who might have had a successful masturbation routine in the past, but then is placed on like an antidepressant or an antipsychotic or an anti-anxiety medication, or maybe a combination of all three. I've certainly worked with many clients who are on multiple medications, that their previously successful routine is now no longer successful to the point where they are injuring themselves. I want to point out, and I'll show some examples of how we teach this, that we would never be actually physically assisting or in the room with somebody when they're masturbating. That would be an ethical violation. It could border on illegal as well. So not something that we would ever do as professionals, nor do we suggest even that parents would do that. Because it does start to blur the lines for people around that privacy boundary, right? So if we're teaching that like it's okay for somebody to come into your room and help you to touch your vulva, then that's opening the door to that person being more likely to be sexually assaulted potentially in the future. So we have to find some other kind of creative ways to try to teach some of these masturbation skills. And it's something that often is like not taught. So what Barb and I will do often is use other sort of teaching materials. So often we will use stand-ins. And so this is, I'm going to show two examples where I've used stand-ins. So they're realistic sort of models of vulvas and penises, and they will show some video picture schedules is what they're called, to teach masturbation. So giving people that warning. So for example, how to masturbate for a vulva with the steps of like getting lubricant, putting it on fingers, touching around the outside of the vulva and the clitoris, wiping off after you're finished and going to wash hands. And how to masturbate for a penis, again, getting lubricant. This one shows a masturbation aid or a masturbation sleeve, using that, putting it on the penis until there's ejaculation. Sometimes I will leave ejaculation out because it doesn't have to be the result of masturbation. It can just be a self-soothing or pleasure focus, and then cleaning up afterwards with washing the toy and washing hands. So those are both examples that I've made for clients. We have just like a short list of other things that we've had to explicitly teach, which we won't read out, but we just wanted to highlight that often some of the things that people think like, well, they'll just pick that up or they'll just figure that out from somewhere, will actually need to be explicitly taught. Barb, I don't know if you have any of these that you wanted to point out before we show our sort of how to find us and get in touch slides and have some time for questions.
No, I think that's great. And I mean, honestly, I feel like it's an ongoing list. It's an ongoing list. So I don't know, we could name 4 things on here, and by the time I say it, there's already something else I've been asked to do differently. So
Yeah, basically, I think our kind of point is that like often we have to teach things that neither of us expected to have to teach. And then we have to sort of like create something new. And often, you know, people will ask for like, what's a quick resource that I could just show to my kid to sort of teach this quickly. And I usually say like, well, that's why I have a job, because most of those things don't exist. Most of the like publicly or like easily available sex education materials don't meet the needs of the kids that I'm supporting or youth that I'm supporting, or if they do, they need significant modification. And then often parents or educators need some help in understanding how that might look.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I put this up at the beginning when Kim was introducing us, but this is like all of the places where people can find us. Our websites, I'm at positiveconnections.ca, Barb's at Sex Ed Continuing Ed, which I'm realizing I did not spell correctly in this slide, but the QR code will take you there for sure. And some Instagram and Facebook connections. And Barb and I also host a podcast called Sex Ed Book Review, where we review sex education books. We try in every episode to talk about some experiences that we've had for adapting those materials for neurodiverse children, youth, or adults. So that might be a helpful listen for some parents as well. And we are happy to take questions in the last few minutes that we have.
So yeah, we have just a few minutes. So
we've covered it all.
I think that's the other thing that's so hard is I every time, you know, we talk, especially to families, I feel like there are always questions, and a lot of it is, you know, how do we do this really specific thing? Because it's exactly the point that Landa said is, you know, things are so very, very specific. One other point that I would like to make while we're kind of hanging out, and I mean, and Kim or others, you know, who want to either send a message through chat or hop on the screen, welcome to, please interrupt me. But I was going to say that the ideas that we had, the things that work for the folks that we support, the things that work for the young people that we meet with, these effective teaching strategies, they're also effective for other people too. So this is not something that only works if we're talking about disability. It's something that works for everybody. So feel free to use these ideas, you know, with anybody. If you're feeling like you just want to try something different, same kind of strategies are going to work.
I agree. I really like Landa's visuals that she presented for how to change a pad or how to masturbate. I mean, again, it's kind of out of what we typically think about when we're talking about sex ed, but, you know, a lot of people actually need, you know, all different kinds of learners. Some people actually need the visual to figure out how to do it properly. So I really appreciate that visual. And I also really thought what you said was super important. You know, when we think about those with other needs, we forget that the body, excuse me, is 25, even though mentally they might only be 5. You know, how do we, you know, we forget that their bodies are still growing and developing, and biology, reproduction is it. We all say it starts in the brain, and it does, but there is that biological piece that we can't always control. So we need to make sure that we give young people whatever tools that you all, I'm not an expert in this, so whatever you all are able to provide. So that was a really important piece to this puzzle too, is because they have the mental ability of a 5-year-old, their bodies are 25. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, it's definitely, yeah, I think people get kind of like a bit stuck or surprised. I think that that's something that somebody might have to teach. And again, it does, masturbation in particular is one of those things that I don't usually say, like you have to teach proactively as much, but it does really, you know, can be a little bit reactive, unfortunately. So, and just if somebody is obviously harming themselves, that's tough. And then Kerri just asked in the chat where people could purchase those visuals. The ones that I showed today are I have for sale on my website. So I linked to that there, positiveconnections.ca/resources. And then I do customs. I do custom video models.
I was actually just going to say that's
Yeah.
that even, with the ones that you have, which I have purchased and I have used, immediately it's like, you know what, I need this slightly different modification. So the masturbation sleeve that you use is not exactly the same as the one I'm using. So can you make one that is matching this aid?
Yeah. I had a family who, just due to their home, the living situation, the person's masturbation routine had to take place in the shower because of a shared bedroom. And so I made a video model and visuals in the shower using the device that they had purchased, and then actually made it in the shower so that you could hear the water and see, because this person needed really specific, it needed to match exactly what was happening. They had trouble with that generalization, right? So if I used some other showed it happening in a bedroom, they weren't going to be able to do that skill in the shower, and that's where it needed to happen in the family home for a variety of reasons.
Yeah. And as I think about, I feel like everything that I make is bespoke. It is custom to a specific thing. It's, if we're learning how to use a specific sex toy, a lot of times the pictures aren't quite doing it for the person that I'm meeting with, because they need something more specific. So I'll create videos, and sort of like Landa was saying, very typically a point of view style video on how to disassemble a toy, how to clean a toy, how to, where to put things so that you're putting them away in the right location. And it is truly, truly individualized. So I would say if you're needing that kind of visual support, Landa's probably going to be your first pick. No pun intended. But I'm also, happy to support with that as well. I keep looking at this because you said there's a misspelling and I can't find it.
I know. I honestly think that it isn't. It's just, I thought that there was.
It's a big word.
It's fine, actually. It's a big word. When your mind just starts playing tricks on you and you look at something for too many times and too long.
Absolutely.
Is positive a word?
Positive.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Does anybody have any more questions for Barb and Landa? I thought this was a fantastic presentation, especially since a lot of people, we kind of don't really think about the neurodiverse population that we need to talk to. And you all offered some wonderful tips, and it's nice to have you as our resource that we can call you to educate our population in that area. But if anyone has any questions or comments, this is a great time. You've got two incredible experts right here, ready to help.
I just wanted to share something. A colleague of mine, Chelsea Oaten, we started a group called Quality Connections in Nanaimo, and it's a 6-part series for 18 plus to learn about sexual health, but also to be able to be connecting with one another. We do an icebreaker, and then they, have a snack or whatever. And I just wanted to share that after our first session, that I think that was the happiest and most joyful I felt since pre-COVID, to bring 15 individuals together. We even had 5 come from Duncan. It's just such an incredible opportunity to witness people engaging with peers outside of their families and outside of their caregivers. And I really appreciated today's presentation. And I always am looking for people who also believe that, equality and access to information for all people is of top priority. So thank you both for your presentation today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to add on to that, if it's okay. One is not only that I think it needs to be a priority, but it's also a human right. So these are things that need to be happening for everybody. And the other thing, just because it kind of sparked my brain, one thing that is absolutely missing is opportunities to be opportunities for romantic connection. That there are some places that are, social events or learning events. So being able to start having conversations about how do we get people connected? And there's one dating app that is very specific for autistic people, but we're still needing to learn how to navigate how to use those dating apps. But to be able to find things in person for people who want to be meeting in person. I think that's still absolutely a gap. So cool. Thanks, Kerri.
That's a good point too. Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. If there are no other questions, I guess we can end this segment. Thank you so much for presenting today. I really, really appreciate it. What we're going to do next, and then again, your resources that you all sent me the links, that will be on the email that's going out this afternoon, along with the link to this actual presentation. So I know some people joined later. They weren't able to join for the first section, and everybody will have access to all three speakers. So I will get that out this afternoon. What we're going to do now is what we did at the last break. If people need a little break to go get something to drink or just take a little mental break, I'm going to run some videos of other speakers in the Alliance with their expertise. And this is an opportunity to hear what others of us are doing. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to give this a go again, because if you weren't here before, I blew it. So here we go.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kerri Isham. I'm a certified sexual health educator based out of Nanaimo, BC, Canada. And I'd like to share one of my top parenting tips for raising healthy, happy preteens and teenagers. I think it's very difficult to be raising kids these days, and it's even more difficult to be raising children who have support needs. I really want to encourage people to include sexual health education as part of everyday discussions at the dinner table, in the car, from a very young age. I know kids with support needs also, they're dealing with toileting sometimes, toileting issues, behavioral issues, food allergies and things like that. But if we delay sexual health education for our students with special needs, it makes it very difficult for them later, because they may be acting out in behaviors that we are not prepared to manage. Thank you.
Kim Cook here with the Sex Education Alliance, and this is one of my top talking tips. Your child may come to you with a question and you might not be exactly sure how to answer it. So here's a hint. Ask them, turn it back on them and say, well, what do you already know about that subject? That way you'll get a good idea of what information they're actually seeking, and it gives you just a minute to kind of formulate your answer. And here's another hint. If you don't know the answer, that's okay too. Just tell your child, I'm not actually sure. That is a fantastic question. Give me a minute to look it up, or ask the child to look it up with you. But make sure whatever you do get back to them and you answer that question, because you're building that foundation of trust, and they need to make sure that they can come to you and get their questions answered.
Hi, my name's Wendy Sellers, but the kids nicknamed me the Puberty Lady. I'm the author of Puberty, the Wonder Years. For International Sex Education Day on February 2nd, I'd like to share a tip for teaching your children about puberty, bodies, and relationships. Reward curiosity. From the time of birth, children learn about the world around them by being curious. Everything is new to them and full of wonder. Just think about all the questions your child has asked you about everything from applesauce to zebra stripes. That same curiosity is how children learn about their body, relationships, and sexual behaviors. Our positive reactions to their curiosity can help them prepare to be sexually healthy adults. Our negative reactions can fill them with shame and cause them to seek answers from sources that might not be reliable. So the next time your child is curious about bodies, or how babies are made, or what love is all about, reward their curiosity by looking for the answers together and talking about it. Who knows, maybe you'll even reignite your own curiosity. For more tips and resources for parents and caregivers, please visit my website at pubertycurriculum.com.
Hi, parents and other trusted adults. I'm Julia Feldman from Giving the Talk, and today on International Sex Education Day, I wanted to give you a quick tip about how to foster better conversations with the young people in your lives. So here we go. Instead of waiting for the young people in your lives to come to you and initiate conversations about sexuality or relationships or identity, You need to initiate those conversations with them. Now, this might seem counterintuitive because often we're taught to take cues from the young people in our lives about when they're ready to broach certain topics. But when it comes to a topic like sexuality that is so deeply shamed and stigmatized in our society, your silence speaks louder than words. If there's something you're not talking about, it's likely that they're taking cues from you and avoiding discussing it with you. So to show that you are a trusted person that they can come to with vulnerable topics and questions and curiosities, you need to lead the charge and initiate conversations with them to model your comfort and safety. Have fun talking.
Hi, I'm Justine from Sex Education Australia. There's no doubt that children and young people are curious about bodies and sex. With easy access to the internet, it's more important than ever that we're talking to the children in our care about these topics. We have to create some space. We have to nudge Google out of the way and let children know that we can be the go-to person for their questions. We can encourage conversations and share our values and ideas by asking questions. Start with asking our children what they know. And then here's the thing, listen to what they have to say. Sometimes we feel we have to get in there and tell them everything we think they need to know and give them a bit of a lecture, but listen to what they have to say and then share some of your values and ideas. This doesn't have to be a one-off conversation or once where we feel like we've got to share everything all at the one time. We can think about it in terms of lots of little conversations that happen related to lots of things that are happening around the world. It's easier than we think, so give it a go and you'll probably find it's really, really rewarding. All right, good luck.
Hello, happy International Sex Education Day. I'm Leah, Director of Outspoken Sex Ed. We get parents talking openly with their kids about sex and relationships topics. So here's what I'd say to a kid who's around age 12 about pornography. Okay, there's porn. You know, Billie Eilish said she regrets that she watched so much porn when she was younger. But curiosity about sex and porn is natural. Have you seen porn? It's important to think critically about porn and realize it's staged, it's heavily edited, and often it's violent. Porn can create unrealistic expectations in people about how bodies should look or how sex should be. It doesn't show what real sex feels like, which is sometimes awkward or messy or tender or funny. It doesn't show things like condoms or consent or intimacy. Think about porn in terms of neuroscience and how it affects your brain. It can feel addictive to click on image after image, which might not leave you feeling all that great. And the last thing I want to say is don't let porn take over your imagination. Pay attention to your own desires and enjoy your own fantasies. Something like that. So head over to outspokeneducation.com and sign up to our newsletter where you'll get a great roundup of the latest news stories that you can use as ways in for talking openly with your kids about sex and relationships any day of the year. Good luck.
Hello, I'm Kara Haug from Reframing Our Stories. And my business focuses on sexual health education to schools, families, and churches. One of the taglines I've come up with that I say in each one of my workshops is this: you are worth the awkward. Having sexual health conversations can be awkward. It can feel weird, but that's because we haven't had the moments or experiences of talking about it enough. So let me say this: you are worth the awkwardness. You're worth stepping into those moments when we may not feel confident so that you and your child can learn about relationships and sexuality and our bodies. Because when we learn about those things and have those conversations, we have better success at having these really great relationships that we desire. So today, on International Sexual Education Day, step into that awkwardness with your child and practice these conversations.
Hi, my name is Lauren Barineau, and I'm a health educator. I'm a mom of 3 kids, and I'm the author of the book, Good Sexual Citizenship, How to Create a Sexually Safer World. And I want to talk for a minute about the idea of age appropriateness. This is an idea that many of us have, that it is inappropriate to talk to younger kids about sexuality and that they will somehow be scarred or damaged by knowledge that they are not ready for. Problem is, this notion that we are somehow talking to kids before they are ready often prevents us from having crucial and what I would say are age-appropriate conversations about things like bodies, consent, personal safety and healthy expression of sexuality. These topics are particularly important for kids who might be marginalized in some way, for LGBTQIA kids, for children who have experienced sexual violence, who might not get the information that is crucial to them. But because we are worried that we are harming them, we often clam out. So I would encourage everyone out there to look for resources to help you have important early conversations and to feel encouraged in the knowledge that having these conversations, far from harming children, is actually very protective for them. So get talking.
Moving on, our main story tonight concerns.
Whoops. Sorry about that with John Oliver. Yes, so, and I apologize for the last video. The sound was wonky on my end too. I shouldn't have probably posted that one because of the sound, but her advice was good. So anyway, it is 11:09 my time. So we are going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. I'm going to pin me so I can see myself there. Hopefully everybody is still with us. I know a couple of people have had to leave, but we've got a pretty good crowd here right now. So I'm very happy about that. And as I mentioned before, you all are going to be getting an email at the end of this with links to all of the freebies that you're getting, plus with this presentation. So you will have the opportunity to enjoy that later. So our final presenter is here. I'm going to introduce Kerri Isham of Power Up Education. Today, she's presenting on Body Smart right from the start. Kerri Isham is a knowledgeable, experienced, and passionate educator, coach, and facilitator dedicated to excellence and committed to the empowerment of people of all ages. Her primary goal is to make exploring sexual health fun and meaningful, and to alleviate the shame and embarrassment that is sometimes associated with this topic. Currently, she runs her own company called Power Up Education, which specializes in sexual health education for preschool to grade 12. Her three main areas of focus are sexual abuse prevention, supporting children, youth and adults with support needs, and the impact of pornography viewing on children and youth. Kerri completed the Sexual Health Educator Certification Program in June 2011 with options for sexual health in Vancouver. So Kerri, I am going to let you take it from here.
All right. This was an early day for me. I've been up since 6, usually sleeping a little bit longer, but I'm really glad that I rolled myself out of bed to hear the other presenters. So I just wanted to begin by acknowledging that I am an uninvited guest on the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. So coming to you from Nanaimo, let me see. Nope, it's not snowing. 2 days ago, we had snow, which was kind of interesting. It didn't last for very long, but in my community, when it snows, things kind of come to a halt a little bit. We don't have the resources to manage that. So thank you, Kim, for offering this today. I think it's so important to begin these conversations earlier, and I'm just going to take a second here to share my slides. Okay. All right, how is that? Can you see my slide, Kim?
Yep.
Okay, super. All right, so this presentation is called Body Smart Right from the Start. I just wanted to start off with a visual of, and I'm assuming the people in this group are the second image, but I find often when I'm talking to parents who are quite resistive of what I'm sharing in schools or in preschools, that some parents are more comfortable like this. And this is also in the teen years as well. I'm just going to pretend that I don't need to know what's going on. And then if I pretend, then I don't actually have to deal with what's actually happening in the world. So I would prefer if parents showed up in the world like this, open, curious, bright-eyed, and really wanting to engage with other parents, teachers, other professionals, and their own teens or children, so that they can all be on the same page, access healthy, up-to-date information. I would rather people be really open and alert than the first image. Okay, great. Kim, is it my job to monitor the chat, or are you doing that?
Either way works for me. I can monitor and let you know.
Okay, that sounds great.
Sure.
So, okay. So I want to live in a world like this, where kids' curiosity would lead them to potentially using pads as band-aids for their dogs while they're playing with their veterinarian skills. This picture was sent to me by my friend. Her son is learning at home, and he's now a teenager, and of course needed some logs. And what better choice than tampons? Now, maybe he knew what they were used for, maybe not. Maybe he would ask, and maybe that's a conversation that he would have a little bit older. Every family is different. This is another picture that was sent to me by my friend. Her daughters are much older now, playing horsey, and what a perfect sized saddle. Now, the thing I love about this is these girls know where to find these items. So when they know they're sticky because they've taken off the back, and when the parent is ready to have that discussion about periods and pads and things like that, they already know where they are. They already know that they're sticky, and it's a really easy entrance. Like, yeah, this is something that you use when you get your period. It's going to happen, you know, average age is 11, some before, some after. I've had my period too, so feel free to ask me any questions. This one I love. This was a picture sent to me. And by the way, if you have any great pictures, please send them my way. I will add them to my presentation. You know, one of my educators years ago, I think she was destined to be a sexual health educator from kindergarten on, brought a tampon for show and tell, right? So kids having access to these, you know, that's probably an expensive hobby to be using those in the bathtub, but they're again, curiosity driven for sure. This is my friend's daughter pretending to be a doula with her pregnant monkey. And I thought this was super cute. A little boy got lost at the YMCA and found himself in the women's locker room. When he was spotted, the room burst into shrieks with ladies grabbing towels and running for cover. Then the little boy watched in amazement and then asked, "What's the matter? Haven't you ever seen a little boy before?" And so from a child's perspective, I mean, if they've already seen naked bodies in their home, it was more about him than seeing adults without their bathing suits on or clothes on. So one of the things for my business is to really focus on teaching body science from age 2 and up. So much so that if they're brushing their hair, brushing their teeth, we talk about bodies, we talk about hygiene, all of those things from a very young age. It really lays a foundation for conversations as teenagers when kids feel really comfortable with their bodies. So the first image, why do we teach sexual health education early? Well, we are children's lifesavers. It might be the school sexual health teacher. It could be a teacher. It could be an aunt or uncle or a parent or an older brother or sister. We are a lifeline for these kids. I loved what Barb said before, and I feel this too. It's like access to information about your body is a human right. And regardless of your, racial background, financial background, wherever you live in the world, everybody should have access to this information because it's very simple. When I teach kids, we all have a body. We should be able to ask questions about it, learn about it, and talk about it. And when I start that, I start that with 2-year-olds saying that, and they're like, but I also use that with high school students too. I say the same thing. Even if I did an adult only workshop, I would be saying the same thing. It seems to ease people. right? We are all common, have a commonality. We all have a body. We also teach early because kids are like sponges. They're going to absorb the information like a sponge and really only absorb what they need at the time. I know for me, there were questions that were repeated when my daughter was younger, sometimes daily, until she was able to understand what I was saying. We teach early to shut down myths that kids hear on the playground, from the internet, from their peers. So if we're giving them accurate information, we can actually have our child potentially be the go-to person on the playground, like the sex education show on Netflix, right? The mom is a sexual, she's a counselor, sexual health counselor, psychologist, and then the son becomes the go-to person and he ends up actually charging people. I'm not saying that's, don't necessarily encourage your child to do that, who knows, but in an old sort of dilapidated building, sitting on a toilet, having conversations with teenagers that were just sucking in the information because they didn't have it. We teach early because I don't ever want to see a child like this in any of my classes. I don't want to be the first one to teach them about erections. I don't want to be the first one to teach them about masturbation. Sexual health education shouldn't be a shocking or horrifying situation. And I do see kids like this sometimes would suggest to me that either they haven't had any information at all, or there's been some sexually traumatic event in their past and they don't want to hear this information from someone that they've never even actually met before. We want to teach early to avoid confusion. So I think one of the most confusing things for primary age children is how babies are made and how babies leave the person who's pregnant. So if kids don't understand the difference between the digestive and reproductive system, they may think that a person who's pregnant poops out the baby. They might think that a seed was planted, much like a watermelon seed, in the ground. And they might think that the baby actually grows in the stomach. So this is something that I actually focus on in grade 2-3 as a foundational tool after learning about safe, unsafe, secret touch, after learning about the rules of no one should touch your private parts unless it's for wiping, washing, if you hurt yourself. And then sort of as a foundation for grade 4, 5, 6, when we talk about puberty. Oh, remember when we talked about reproduction last year, we talked about erections. Well, the reason that we get an erection is because if we ever want to have a baby with someone, one of the most common ways to have a baby is for the penis to go inside the vagina so the sperm and egg can meet. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember last year when we talked about reproduction, we're talking about menstruation this year or having your period. The reason that we talked about, this year is it builds on the information that we got last year and the year before. We teach early because we want children to be able to set healthy sexual boundaries with the people that they trust the most, so that when they enter the teen years, they have a solid foundation around things like consent. We also teach early because we want families to be able to impart their own values and beliefs. I know for myself as an educator, it is not my job to share my own values and beliefs. I share information, and my job is to encourage my students and my clients to go home and talk to their families about what we've talked about. So we teach early because kids who grow up in a home where the bodies are talked about with comfort are more likely to tell their parents when they have an injury to their genitals. So if they wake up with swollen testicles, or if they catch their zipper in their penis, or maybe they have a rash, they're more likely to tell a family that's been open about it than a family that's really driven by shame. We also want to teach early because adults who have had open communication with families and trusted adults growing up are more likely to see a doctor when something has gone wrong with the genitals, maybe a bump, a lump, a sore, something that wasn't there before. Now, I know some people are not from Canada in this discussion, but I know, and I always take time to talk about this, For people with a prostate, conversations around getting your prostate checked happen around 40. Just the conversation doesn't necessarily mean that you need to get your prostate examined. Mammograms are every 2 years, and then PAPs are done every 3 years unless we see irregular cells. And I know it's really important to promote this. Testicular exams, we want to start doing those at about 14, 15 to check for any lumps, bumps, or anything granular like on the testicles. It's really important that we know what our private body parts look like because they're going to change over time. When we become sexually active, we want to notice any changes. After a baby, there's going to be changes, and of course into menopause and aging. So an informed child knows the appropriate sexual vocabulary. And so this is the scientific terms. We use penis, testicles, scrotum. We use clitoris, labia, vulva, vagina, anus, breasts, and mouth. Now, some people may not identify the mouth as a private body part. It's definitely something that I teach my students and my clients. Some people even would say that the entire face is a private area. A lot of people don't want their face touched by other people. It's more of a touch, save for someone that they feel very close to. Informed children know that it's acceptable to talk about their body with their trusted people. They're more likely to share abuse with an adult. Uninformed kids are more attractive to people that are inappropriate with children. These are kids that don't know their private body part names. I have heard kids refer to their front part as a front bum and a back bum. I've had kids refer to the vulva as a cookie, which actually for me makes my skin crawl, because how would somebody report sexual abuse if someone said, well, someone ate my cookie? That's just not going to happen, because the person receiving the information is not going to make that connection. They're unlikely to tell an adult when abuse happens, because you need to have the language to be able to report abuse. And you also need to have, and I'll speak about this a little bit later, you need to be able to attach feelings or emotions to what has happened to you. And silence from adults means never talk about it. So in a family where nobody talks about bodies at all, kids get a very specific message. And the message is, don't talk about this. This would be maybe even potentially dangerous for me to bring this up. So sexual health guidelines, accessible to all people. So just adding on from what Barb and Landa was saying earlier is, often I will hear that a child with support needs will be still in 2023 removed from a sexual health lesson. And the person makes, a statement like, well, I don't really think they understand. And, they might have some behavioral challenges. I've been teaching for 27 years. I have seen it all. I've experienced it all. And if a child stays in my class and they learn this much, and if I have a private client and I have them for 6 sessions and they're able to say penis by the end without literally turning red, that is a win, because all of these small incremental changes and comfort level changes is a move in a good direction. We always want to be age appropriate. Sometimes during my Q&A questions, I'll have a question that is a little bit outside of, let's say, what a grade 4, may ask. And there's only been 2 times in the 27 years that I've been doing this that I didn't answer the question. And of course, I'm going to have to share now because I told you that, because you're wondering, what it was. Grade 4 asked me, do you know what oral sex is? So this is a number of years ago. Now, because of the access of pornography, this is a question that I would actually expect. So if we know that the average age of pornography viewing is 8 or 9 for boys, this is a question. At the time, this wasn't something that was as easily accessible. Pornography was not easily accessible. So I said, someone asked me a question and I'm not going to address the whole class, but if you want to know the answer, I'm available after class. And this girl came up to me and I said, do you know what this means? Because that's always a good start to ask them, hey, what do you think it means? She's like, well, it means when you put your mouth on someone's private parts. I'm saying, oh yeah, that is actually accurate. Where did you learn that from? Oh, my mom told me. I'm like, great. You know, this is something probably that is private between you and your mom, because not all the kids in the class may want to know about that. And their parents may not want you to share that information. Oh, okay. Now, after that, do I have any control over whether she shares that on the playground? No. My other question that I got was from a grade 7 student, and this was a long time ago, way before pornography became so easily accessible. And he asked, why do women like it? Sorry to be graphic, but this is a sexual health training. Why do women like it when you ejaculate on their face? And even though I've been teaching for a long time, I was like, I am going to take my 24-hour rule, because I told the kids, if there's a question that I don't want to answer right now, because I need more information, I'm going to gather in the information. And luckily, I was seeing that class again. If I wasn't seeing that class again, I probably would have had to muster something up. And so what I actually said was, I would say, you know, everybody has different sexual preferences, but you would need to ask the person if you were able to do that ahead of time. And that's kind of how I answered it. At the moment, I was like, they don't. And I'm like, but that's not true, because some people might. So then I have to answer in an inclusive way. Guidelines, culturally sensitive. For example, I know that Muslim women do not use tampons. And so when I share information about how to manage moon time, I would give a variety of different choices and let the person pick what is best for them. An informed choice. So for me, I don't want young people engaging in sexual activity without having information. I want them to know, where can I go if I'm in an unhealthy relationship? What resources are in town? Where do I go to get an STI test done? Where can I learn about consent? Where can I get information on birth control? Where can I get a pregnancy test? Where can I get information so that I can make the very best choice for myself? So what do preschool kids need to know? So this is like 3, 4, 5-year-olds. They need to know the names of the genitals using science words. And it's okay if they still call it a pee or a wiener, but they have to understand that there's certain places like the doctor's office or when they're talking to you that you would want them to use the science words. I would want them to know about reproduction prior to entering kindergarten, just so that they have that foundational information. And I think I still have it. I used to have a script that parents, I could send them that says, if you just want to give this much information about reproduction, here it is, level 1. Level 2 includes a little bit more, and level 3, depending on the parent's comfort level. Baby grows in the uterus. The baby passes either through the vagina or removed through C-section. Some kids walk in on their adults, changing their pad, tampon, or menstrual cups. And sometimes they might, well, if that body changes happens to you, what maybe has happened to my dad if they live in a mom-dad family? Don't touch condoms. So just like we encourage kids, please don't pick up needles from the ground. Please don't pick up Kleenex from the ground. If you see a condom on the ground, do not pick it up. Ask a trusted adult to help you. Rules about privacy. One of the things that's super important for kids as they transition into kindergarten is privacy around toileting. In a lot of families, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a mother, for example, would very rarely be able to pee alone, because there seems to be always someone in the bathroom while you're in there. But when they transition, they need to know that most kindergarten classes have a bathroom in the actual room, but that's not always the case. And they need to know that they need to close the door for privacy, because I have kindergarten or friends who teach kindergarten. Sometimes, someone's in the bathroom, there's 3 or 4 other people in there, someone's on the toilet, someone's washing their hands, someone's having a conversation, and we need them to understand that we need to have privacy. Bodies belong to you. And safe, unsafe, secret touch, which both of these topics are kindergarten grade 1. Primary checklist. So new scientific words may be like stool, for example. If someone needs to have a stool sample, they need to know it's not the stool that you sit on, but it's another word for fecal matter or feces or poo. Digestive reproductive system and how they're different. Body changes at puberty. So in British Columbia, our curriculum allows us to be able to talk about puberty in grade 3. And this is because some kids are starting puberty earlier and they need the information. No longer are the days where we can start the puberty conversation in grade 6, 7. This is far too late. Sexual orientation. All families are different. And then obviously we need to be teaching about consent. So in terms of consent, I'd like to use the Santa Claus picture example. And I did this myself. So we do better when we know better, when we have information, right? So you picture a long lineup ready to see Santa. Some of the kids are crying. Some of the kids are joyful. Most of the parents are, disgruntled because it's been a long wait. Then your child gets to Santa, they were fine, now they're crying. And so for me, that's an opportunity for us to understand that the child is not able to say how they're feeling, specifically like, I don't want to do this. And that's when I saw during COVID, and I love this, kids started standing beside Santa instead of sitting on Santa's lap. Because I'm pretty sure even the most jolly Santa doesn't really love having crying children on the lap because they know the child doesn't want to be doing that. So when we're asking kids to offer types of affection for family members or extended family members, we always want to give choice. And I started this very young. My niece just turned 8. And I say to her, how would you like to say goodbye to me today? High five, fist bump, hug, kiss, like what would you like? And it's something so simple, but I want her to believe and own that she has autonomy over her own body. Not a big fan of tickling. I think the reason I'm not is because I know so many people who experience that as a grooming tool. So the person tickling their body, no response, tickling different parts of their body, no response, and then going for the genitals. And it's very confusing if that's happening for a child to understand, well, that kind of feels good, but I know that also that people shouldn't be doing that as well. Okay. So in my, just a second.
Kerri,
Yeah.
we have a question from Sasha. Do you suggest modeling private bathroom time at home to prepare kids for respecting private bath time at school and public if the practice at home is open door?
Yeah, I think this is something that I would really want, you can role play and make it really fun and very dramatic. It's like, oh, look at me. I'm going to the bathroom and I'm closing the door because I am getting ready for kindergarten, even though you are the adult. I have to close the door so that nobody can see my private parts because at school, the classroom is a public place, but the bathroom is private and I should be alone. So this is something that I would probably suggest starting about 6 months before your child goes to kindergarten, because most families have an open door policy until kids get a little bit more modest, as they're, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, they sometimes automatically do that, but they need to do that as part of their privacy practices at school as well. So we have the names. I'm just going to move this up here. Sorry, I have something in the way. There we go. So names for private body parts is part of our curriculum in British Columbia. We're very fortunate. We have a curriculum called Physical and Health Education. It's from kindergarten to grade 10. In many ways, BC is quite progressive. The challenge is our curriculum is quite ambiguous. So somebody like me would really dig deep into some of the competencies and the things that need to be taught. And somebody else might be like, no, I'm not going to do that because it's so broad the way that they've worded it. Appropriate, inappropriate touch. I teach safe, unsafe, secret touch because for me, a child who has experienced sexual abuse from a very young age may not be able to differentiate between appropriate and inappropriate, because how would they know, especially if they haven't had any sexual health outside of the home. And families where there's inappropriate touching happen will often pull their child out of sexual health because they know there's a potential for them to report. Hazardous and unsafe situations could be pool safety, could be body safety, could be kitchen safety, right? And so a teacher may choose to do the non sort of body situations where I, as a sexual health educator, would do all of the body stuff and not worry about road safety and things like that. Caring behaviors, emotions, and managing and expressing them. So these are characters that I use. I do a lot of work in Indigenous communities. These are characters that I use to talk about if we're wearing our bathing suit, most of our private parts are found underneath. And this is something, all kids have a bathing suit. Most kids like to go swimming, not all. And then, so we teach the mouth, the breast, the vulva, the anus. And then we've got the one where the bathing suit is off. I actually have large, like foam board ones of these as well. So we would go mouth, breast, vulva, anus, and that the vagina is found on the inside of the body and the vulva is on the outside. That's basically like my life mission. Vulva on the outside, vagina on the inside. My kindergarten kids can get this, so I'm trying to change the world with that. This is another person. Again, private body parts found underneath the bathing suit, front and back. And then we have the mouth, the breast, the penis, the testicles, the scrotum, the anus. So I wanted to share a resource with you, and I think I have it cut and pasted, so I can just put it in there right now. So if you work with clients, or if you are teaching in schools, just have to move this. So I'm having a difficulty moving, here we go, the chat. This is a really great resource that I give out to any preschool, primary age school children that I have access to. You can get it from the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. It's in French and English, and they're free, and they ship them to you for free as well. We need kids to be able to say, somebody touched my penis and I felt angry, or I felt sad, or I felt surprised, or I felt angry. All right, I just wanted to share a little video clip with you. This is a public service announcement by Kids for Adults.
Hi parents, listen up. I'm going to teach you something. I know I'm just a kid, but this is a serious subject, so listen up. First of all, parents, there's something that you need to know. Certain areas of my body are private. Certain areas of my body are private, and it's not okay for anybody to touch. It's not okay for anyone to touch my vagina. It's okay to talk about your body parts and call them their real names. V-A-G-I-N-A. Only I can touch it. I have a head, eyes. Oh, my mom. Nose, mouth, chin, arms, penis. P-E-N-I-S. Girls have a vagina and boys have a penis. If you don't know what a penis or a vagina is, ask your mom. Kids need to have good information about their bodies, and that's where you parents come in. Girls have a vagina, boys have a penis, and everyone has a butt. And I assume everybody knows where their butt is. You might feel a little awkward, but kids like me are totally open to it. This isn't something to laugh about. It's important. And the more you talk about it, the easier it is. The more you do it, the easier it is. Talking about these things is not a one-time thing. It's something you do your whole life. Parents and kids need to talk to each other a lot. It's really important for parents to talk to their kids their whole lives. We kids understand a lot, but we need some help too. Kids need to know a lot of safety rules, and touching rules are just some of them. And there are different kinds of touch. There's 3 kinds of touches: okay touches, not okay touches, and confusing touches. There's okay touch, not okay touch, and confusing touch. This is called education, and it helps stop bad behavior. It's okay touch if my mom kisses me goodnight. It's not okay touch if the man next door kisses me. Sometimes I see my little sister's vagina, but it would be weird if a babysitter showed me hers. I can see my sister naked, but I don't want to see little ladies naked. One of the most important things is for kids to tell if someone tries to touch their private parts. Kids need to know that if someone touches them, they can tell their mom. Secrets are never good. This goes for grown-ups too. It's important for kids to know if someone does touch them, it's never their fault. It's your fault if you don't clean your room. It's never your fault if somebody touches your private parts. It's not just about someone touching a kid. It's never the kid's fault. No one should ask the kid to touch them. This is called education, and if we communicate more, we can all do a lot to stop sexual abuse. So now, parents, if we kids can do it, you guys can do it. Don't just wait for us to tell. It's good to ask questions, too. Now it's up to you guys. You think we can do it? The world isn't perfect, but we can make it better. We can. So I'll see you later. We have some work to do.
So someone's asking me, I don't have the link to the video because it's not available on YouTube anymore, but if you email me, I can send you, I think it's an MP4 file, MP3, I don't know, my husband does all that stuff for me. So a couple things about that video, right? So it's a little bit outdated in the terminology or in the expression of boys have a penis and girls have a vagina. So that isn't true. So I still love this video though, but I would say at the beginning of the video, hey, they're going to say this. And we know that some people are transgender. And so like to kind of mask over that piece. And then also using, I would say to students, you might notice that they actually say vagina instead of vulva. And sometimes they're going to remember more that I pointed out the mistake than like, you know, hearing, oh yeah, the vagina. Okay, got it. I wanted to share this book. I don't know if people, and I just thought of it right now. This book I've used a couple of times with clients to name what was happening within the home. And it is straight up. This is what it is. When someone touches you, when they ask you to touch them, when they ask you to put your mouth on their private parts, like it's very, and you know, not all kids need that specific information, but I find it's really helpful in certain situations. Okay, did someone put something in the chat? Okay, great. So this is a tool that I use for, well, kindergarten, grade 1, but this is K-3, but it's also, I do workshops in my home space as well for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds with an adult. So the rules about touch are very specific in my teaching, is that nobody should touch your private parts unless it's for wiping, washing, or if you hurt yourself. And then I say, put up your hand if you wipe your own bum. And then some kids put, and some people are still learning. Put up your hand if you're washing your own private parts. And if you hurt yourself, where would you go? And they usually say to the doctor, the hospital. One of the important tools that that parents can teach their children is that if they wipe their bum early, of course, every parent wants that. If they wash their own private parts early, then other people don't need to have access. So I'll give you an example. If you have a babysitter and the babysitter said, hey, you want to have a bath? I'll put lots of bubbles in it. And the child's like, oh, well, I love baths. And the babysitter says, oh, do you want help washing your private parts? Like, nope, got it. Already learned how to do it. Because kids that age take a lot of pride in their ability to do things for themselves. That itself could prevent an inappropriate interaction because the child's like, no, I got it. I already know how to do it. So then the child puts in the facial features, the hair, draws a bathing suit, and then labels the mouth, breasts, anus. And at the bottom, I get them to put penis, vulva, or genitals. I don't do genitalia. I just feel like they just understand genitals easier. It's easier word. And so then this is very inclusive. If there's any students in my class that are transgender or not sure about how they want to call their private parts, then they don't have to out themselves to their neighbor, right? Because the kids want to look at each other's pictures and things like that. And then there's this. I like doing jokes every now and again, especially in workshops where anything's getting towards the heavier side. I like to just joke around a little bit. This is the song that I use. This is from a book called Some Secrets Should Never Be Kept. And I contacted the author and I just said, hey, am I able to use this song? And they said, absolutely. So this is a song, I sing it too often. Sometimes I start singing in the shower when I'm alone because I have this in my head so often. This song helped one of my students disclose. We don't know, is it going to be a story? Is it going to be the worksheet? Is it going to be the song? Is it going to be my anatomically correct dolls? We want to use a variety of tools with the little people so that they can, lots of visuals too. It's like, oh yeah, well, that's what my grandpa did. When he was reading me a story, he touched my penis. Oh, because I have a picture of a grandparent read, and I say, hey, do you think it would be okay if somebody touched your private parts when they were reading a story? And most kids are like, no. But one time I said, well, that's what my grandpa does, right in the middle of a kindergarten class. So then I'm like, thanks for telling me. Talk about it later. And I just completely move on because kindergarten, grade 1 are the more common times for disclosures. And I think the last thing I wanted to talk about for safety for little people is they need to know about their private body part names. They need to know about the wiping, washing, or if you hurt themselves rule, but they also need to know who are their trusted adults. And it's really important. I got more information from Consent Parenting on this around specifics of who is a trusted adult. It's not just because you're a mom or a dad, aunt or uncle, teacher, that doesn't make you a trusted adult. That just makes you a person in that child's life. A trusted adult respects a child's body boundaries. So they don't hug them without asking. They don't poke them or touch their body. A person would never, a trusted adult will never ask a child to keep a secret about anything, especially not about their private body parts. A person that helps them and supports them when they need it with whatever it is they need. A person who believes them when they share something with them, especially if they report abuse, they believe them the first time. And then a person who allows me as the child to have all of my feelings is a trusted adult, because we don't want kids to be like, you can only have this feeling and this feeling. You can't express anger. You can't express frustration, and certainly never cry. So a trusted adult would allow a child to have all of their range of emotions. So the last thing I would like to say is these conversations, like Lauren was talking about, have to happen early. They have to happen repeatedly. They can happen at the dinner table. They can happen in the car. They can happen at the park. A lot of the times when kids are unwinding at the end of the day, bedtime routines is a great time to talk about, oh, you're going to your friend's house tomorrow. Remember when we go to friend's house, these are the expectations. We keep our clothes on. We don't touch other people's private parts and things like that. And I don't know about you, but the bedtime was the time where things would come out just when you were this close to having a child-free moment. That's when the tears started. Something happened at school and they needed to tell you at 7:59 because the bedtime was at 8. Did anyone ever have that happen? And yet I wouldn't have given up those moments for anything, even though I single parented my daughter. It was exhausting, but that's when the juicy bits come out. So I have classes on Zoom, Power Up Education Eventbrite. And my website is powerupeducation.com. I have lots of pre-recorded videos if parents want help of like talking about private body part names, safe, unsafe, secret touch. I have a pre-recorded video about consent, one on the digestive reproductive system. And once you purchase them, you also get a PDF of my Body Smart Right from the Start book. And you'll have the video. If you download it, you'll have it forever. So you can watch it more than once. And that's why I feel like the pre-recorded videos are even more important than the live presentations, because as a parent, you can go over and over and over things. And maybe the kids, it'll be their new favorite video to talk about private body parts. All right. Yeah, so someone said, I also appreciate the distinction between tricky people and tricky behavior situations, which I learned from Consent Parenting. Absolutely. I teach that strangers are people we haven't met yet. Most strangers are going to help us because we know it's very, very rare that a stranger, because they don't have access or a relationship to your child. So at 85 to 95%, depending on which study you read, kids being sexually abused by someone that they know well. someone, you know, in the immediate family or extended family or babysitter. Okay. Yeah. Teach about surprises and secrets as well. In my Body Smart book, this is so important. I don't really ever use secrets for anything. I can't really think of anything that I would need to say to a child, like, let's keep this a secret. If it's a birthday, it's a surprise. If it's a present, it's a surprise. If it's a trip with the family, it's a surprise. Everybody finds out about it. Secrets are usually hurtful, right? Not always, but usually hurtful. And the person doesn't want you to tell. And the reason they don't want you to tell is because they know they've done something that wasn't okay. All right. Well, I think I'm pretty much done there. How did I do for time? Ooh, I went over a little bit. Sorry, Kim.
Oh, no, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do have the gift of the gab for this kind of stuff. I get pretty excited. So.
And you're such an excellent presenter. I mean, I took a lot of notes. Even I loved your teaching strategies when you were talking about the guidelines. I thought those were outstanding. And I loved your definition of a trusted adult, because we do throw that term around a lot, trusted adult, but we don't really dig down. Well, what is a trusted adult? You know, just because you have the label nurse doesn't mean you're trusted. So I love that. Thank you for that distinction. I thought that was awesome. And also that grade levels K and 1 are the most common time for disclosure, which when you think about developmentally, psychologically, that makes sense. You know, they're kind of innocent and they don't really understand that this is something mom or dad or whatever doesn't want you to share. I love that. I thought that was brilliant. And I do want to open this up if anybody wants to unmute themselves, if they have any questions for Kerri or any other comments. This is a great time to talk with her. All right. Well, I guess if there aren't any more comments, I know a lot of people are busy and it's been a wonderful 3 hours. I do want to thank all of my presenters. Kerri, thank you so much. Landa, Lauren, Barb, you all are amazing. Thank you so much for presenting today, and for all of you for taking time to attend this presentation. You will be receiving an email today or tomorrow with the link to this event and also the free materials offered by our speakers. If you are a sex educator, someone in this space, excuse me, I invite you to consider joining the C. We have monthly meetings once or twice a month, and we actually have a lot of fun. We're a pretty easygoing group, and we're here to support one another. If you are a parent or another trusted adult, which now we have a better definition of that, if you ever need any assistance in your parenting journey, please come to our website. We have the best of the best, excuse me, and you'll have access to the most experienced and knowledgeable educators around. We are here to help you, and you can go on our website. You'll see all of our educators. You can just click on any one of them in any country, community, and you'll have access to them. Thank you so much for coming, and together we can make waves in sex education by working together as parents, as educators, as other professionals who care about kids. So thank you all for coming.